361. On the importance of acting skills to ninjas. Danzo Shimura was meticulous about anything involving root. Even though Mu Yue's reply arrived late at night, Danzo read it immediately. He expected the leader to set the example when it came to working late. As he skimmed the message, he found himself nodding. The root operatives he'd raised from childhood were, after all, more dependable. Mu Yue had left Root and was now the Ninja Academy's vice principal and had seen some success on the battlefield, but the tone of the reply revealed he still regarded Danzo with deep respect. Danzo bristled when he read Mu Yue's concern. Secret training of Root members might earn Hiruzen Sarutobi's displeasure. His annoyance wasn't directed at Mu Yue, but at Hiruzen. Lately, Hiruzen had rejected several of Danzo's proposals, and given what Danzo knew of the third Hokage, Mu Yue's worry was sensible. Hiruzen did not want Root gaining strength, and calling Mu Yue back under the guise of special training would certainly make Hiruzen uncomfortable. Danzo preferred secrecy. Negotiating with Hiruzen would invite complication, but he also realized secrecy would be hard to maintain. Mu Yue was still taught at the academy during the day. To train with Root, he would have to come by at night and slip back and forth. That routine would be noticed by Hiruzen's Anbu. After weighing the risks, Danzo decided the safest course was to speak with Hiruzen directly. If the plan was discovered, Mu Yue would be compromised and could be used as an excuse to further weaken Root. Early the next morning, Danzo strode into the Hokage building and headed straight for the office. He did not knock. He pushed the door open. Hiruzen, looking up from his papers, smiled and set them down. In a hurry? Something urgent? Hiruzen had scolded Danzo a few times recently, but he didn't bother mentioning Danzo's habit of barging in. They were old classmates. Occasional reproach was enough. There was pride to preserve on both sides. You know Root has lost many excellent members to benefit Konoha on the battlefield, Danzo began, playing the injured party rather than stating his request outright. Hiruzen merely puffed his pipe, exhaled a cloud of smoke, and asked, "Hasn't new blood been recruited?" Hiruzen knew Danzo was exaggerating, but he wouldn't approve expanding Root. Root had already become practically a second Anbu. If anyone else commanded it, Hiruzen would never tolerate such an independent force. Danzo persisted, eyes fixed on Hiruzen. New recruits can't compare to the veterans we lost. Root's strength has declined, and it's affecting operations. The look in Danzo's eyes spoke volumes. Root had bled for Konoha. Shouldn't the village be more accommodating? Hiruzen listened without comment. He felt he had already extended enough leeway to Danzo and Root. I need Hayate Mugetsu to help train the new Root members, Danzo finally said, clenching his fist as if laying down a bottom line. The current Root needs someone with his teaching ability. Hiruzen took his time removing his pipe and tapping the desk, considering. He couldn't allow Mu Yue to be permanently returned to Root. Mu Yue's presence there would be a major boost to Danzo, but he saw no harm in a temporary measure. He can train them, Hiruzen said slowly, but only short-term, and it must be training shared with Anbu. Anbu has taken on new recruits as well, Hiruzen added. If there's going to be instruction, make it joint. Danzo opened his mouth, then shut it when Hiruzen reminded him, don't forget Root's original purpose. Danzo went silent. Root had been ostensibly formed to supply talented shinobi to Anbu. They worked out the details and left the office with Danzo keeping a stony face as if Hiruzen owed him something enormous. Once outside, he relaxed. As Root's leader, he prided himself on his acting skills. That morning had been a performance designed to make Hiruzen feel he'd conceded too much. The compromise achieved Danzo's main aim without forcing a full disclosure. Hiruzen, for his part, understood why he'd refused Danzo outright. He suspected Danzo's motives and wanted to limit Root's influence. Still, with Mu Yue's teaching skills, a short-term joint training made sense. That afternoon, when the academy let out, Hiruzen sent for Mu Yue. Mu Yue knocked and entered after being invited in, greeting Hiruzen respectfully. The Hokage was frank. Anbu and Root have added new members. I want you to conduct special training for them. We'll arrange cover for your classes. Mu Yue feigned modesty. Anbu and Root are already elite. I'm not sure I can teach them much. Don't be modest, Hiruzen said with an expression of trust. Your ability as an instructor is clear. Go and teach them. Grateful, Mu Yue promised to do his best. Hiruzen even discussed Asuma's training before the two left the Hokage building together. On the walk home, Mu Yue considered the assignment. Hiruzen had insisted on a joint Anbu route program, which differed slightly from Danzo's expectation. Another compromise. For Mu Yue, though, this was an opportunity. His system rewarded teaching more people and higher-quality students. Training members from both Anbu and Root at once would be better for his goals than working with a handful of Root initiates. Back home, he sketched a rough plan in 20 minutes and then turned to study sealing techniques for 2 hours. Midway through his evening, Minato arrived to discuss ninjutsu. Mu Yue learned Flying Thunder God from Minato that night, while Minato listened to Mu Yue explain the development of the Rasengan. They talked until late. After Minato left, Mu Yue reviewed breathing techniques before bed. Before sleeping, Mu Yue checked the life mission progress of each of his disciples. The payouts for life mission milestones were generous. If any disciple was close to a settlement point, Mu Yue would help speed them along, as he had for Obito. Obito led in progress and had already settled once. Next was Metkai. Guy's progress was at 9.4%, only 0.6% short of another settlement. Shisui was third but far behind. Kakashi was in last with 0 progress, though his mission was unusual. Mu Yue couldn't say whom between Kakashi and Shisui would settle first. If he can open the 4th gate under normal conditions, a 0.6% jump should be easy, Mu Yue thought. Life mission gains came from strength and fame, but strength typically contributed more. For a small gap, he might have Guy do some high-visibility missions to boost fame, but for 0.6% training to open the 4th gate would be faster. Guy was already close. The next day, Mu Yue arranged with teacher Chen to have Guy temporarily leave the team for special training. He treated all his students fairly. No single disciple would be singled out for pressure. Everyone will need to work harder for a while. The training will be tough, he told them with a gentle smile. Hard training is youth. Guy bellowed with a thumbs up. The more brutal the regimen, the more excited he became. Obito turned pale. Mu Yue rarely warned of harsh training unless it really was severe. Constant state breathing technique had been the most brutal training Obito had experienced. He'd been exhausted to the bone. Kakashi's face grew serious as he recalled that ordeal. Shisui remained calm. Difficult training meant big gains, possibly a shortcut. Shizune sensed the shift in mood but didn't fully grasp it. Obito looked at Shizune with pity. Poor kid, she has no idea what's coming, he muttered. Mu Yue tapped Obito's forehead in reproof and then began laying out the specific programs. The special training would be individualized. Guy would work toward opening the 4th gate, Kakashi would perfect Transparent World, Obito would master flame-breathing chakra mode. Even Shizune, an exchange student treated almost like a disciple, received attention. At first Shizune was puzzled, but once training began she found herself missing days under Tsunade. Tsunade had made her do chores, yet compared to this regimen, chores seemed almost restful. Thoughts of Rin Nohara came to mind. No wonder Rin had become so strong, Shizune thought. Determined, she promised herself not to give up. Lady Tsunade would be proud of her progress. Days passed, and it was time for Mu Yue to begin training the Anbu and Root members. The course would last 2.5 months, finishing just as the 2nd semester at the Ninja Academy ended. Before the sessions began, Mu Yue received the basic dossiers of the participants. Because these were Anbu and Root operatives, the information was limited, but it was more than enough for a short training stint. 30 ninja would take part, 15 from Anbu and 15 from Root. Danzo Shimura and Hiruzen Sarutobi had labeled many as new recruits, but Mu Yue suspected they'd simply counted operatives who'd only been in Anbu or Root for a few years as recruits. He'd expected fewer than 15 per side. Still, 30 elite ninja, many stronger than typical jonin, was an impressive turnout. From the system's reward mechanics, more and stronger opponents increased the chance of better rewards, and on a practical level, it showed that Hiruzen and Danzo valued him enough to place such forces under his instruction. Mu Yue picked a relatively secluded training ground with a forest, a river, and a mountain nearby. He arrived early. The 30 trainees were punctual. Root and Anbu formed in 2 columns and took positions before him. I am Hayate Mugetsu, Mu Yue said in a concise self-introduction. He was already somewhat known in Konoha, but a formal introduction avoided awkwardness. As he spoke, he scanned the group with appraisal technique. Panels flickered past his vision. Name, Fanfiction Shinji. Chakra, AT700. Skills, Lightning Release Nature Transformation, Proficient 115,000. Earth Release Nature Transformation, Skilled 2600, 3000. Lightning Release 4-Pillar Binding. Name, Sarutobi Shinji. Chakra, 1050. Skills, Fire Release Nature Transformation, Proficient 315,000. Water Release Nature Transformation, Skilled 1500, 3000. Fire Release Great Flame Technique. Name, Yamanaka Hiroshi. Chakra, 7200. Skills, Mind Transfer Jutsu, Skilled 2800. Name, Mitani Kohei. Chakra, 9800. The Anbu were generally stronger than the root contingent. Several Anbu already had proficient-level nature transformations and high-level signature techniques. While Mu Yue praised them, they were appraising him in return. Some of the supposed new recruits were genuinely young, but many Anbu operatives with a year or two of service looked skeptical. Fanfiction Shinji, in particular, had heard Mu Yue's reputation. He'd assisted Jiraiya in repelling a Jinchuriki. But it was hard to believe someone who looked 19 and of similar age could improve them significantly in just 2.5 months. Several jonin among the 30 privately agreed. They suspected this training might be more about polishing Mu Yue's resume than actually pushing their limits. Still, none of them would voice that sentiment. In the Shinobi world, strength spoke loudest, and Mu Yue had the Hokage's backing. To facilitate the training, I need to understand your strengths. All of you may attack me now, using your most proficient ninjutsu, Mu Yue said with a faint smile. He'd probably guessed some of their doubts and wanted to establish authority early. Youth could invite underestimation. It was better to set the tone. All of us together? Fanfiction Shinji blurted. He couldn't tell if he'd misheard or Mu Yue had lost his mind. The Anbu side alone had 3 jonin and 2 special jonin, the rest elite chuunin. Root had 2 jonin and 2 special jonin plus strong chuunin. 30 of them acting in concert could overwhelm many organizations. Yamanaka Hiroshi on the Root side looked equally puzzled. Testing one by one is too troublesome, so you all come at once, Mu Yue answered, still smiling. He'd already activated his Byakugan and noticed a few figures watching from the shadows, expected. He also wanted Hiruzen and Danzo to refresh their impressions of his methods and strength. No order from above. Are they really going to? Murmurs ran through the group, but then Mu Yue added, use your full strength. Those who perform exceptionally will be reported to the 3rd Hokage and Assistant Danzo. That promise shifted the mood. Competence was worth recognition. 3 Root Ninja moved first. They flashed to different positions and threw shuriken to restrict Mu Yue's movement, a diversion. Yamanaka Hiroshi launched his family technique, a mind transfer clone jutsu, opting for the more flexible clone version so it could change direction. Under a cover of shuriken, his spirit shot toward Mu Yue. That's not a bad idea, but trying to hold me back with just shuriken is a bit naive, Mu Yue said. To Yamanaka's surprise, Mu Yue vanished from his original spot. Hiroshi's eyes spun, searching desperately. He's too fast. I can't see him, he panicked, and tried to retract his spirit, but it was too late. Mu Yue flashed behind him and delivered a forceful kick. Hiroshi flew, crashing through 6 large trees before he stopped. Silence fell over the training ground. It wasn't that Yamanaka Hiroshi was a legendary jonin, it was the speed and method of his defeat that shocked everyone. Some Root and Anbu had wanted to intervene after Hiroshi's technique, but none reacted fast enough. Mu Yue's body flicker had been blindingly quick. Watching via a crystal ball in the Hokage's office, Hiruzen Sarutobi nodded. Not only strong in ninjutsu, his taijutsu is impressive too, he observed. The display of speed explained why the Anbu hadn't stopped him. Hiruzen was curious how Mu Yue would handle the next phase. The defeated Hiroshi had made everyone on the field aware of Mu Yue's danger. If he'd asked them to go all out, they certainly would. As if on cue, the remaining 29 launched their signature techniques, some combining attacks. Fire Release, Great Flame Technique. Wind Release, Great Breakthrough. Fire Release, Great Dragonfire Technique. Secret Technique, Insect Sphere. An overwhelming barrage of varied chakra signatures surged toward Mu Yue. Though they hadn't fought together as a group, their coordination was far from chaotic. Their attacks were complementary, designed to limit friendly cancellation. Mu Yue calmly formed 2 shadow clones and began hand seals. Feitian Shinji, who had planned to use lightning release to disrupt Mu Yue's movement, watched with growing unease. Did Mu Yue intend to withstand all of this? If so, his strength would be on another level entirely. The main body finished its seals first. A vast amount of chakra transformed into fire release. Mu Yue exhaled and unleashed an enormous high-temperature torrent of flame, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet, but amplified, higher intensity, wider range, far hotter than anything displayed during the chuunin exams. Nearby fighters were forced to step back as trees and grass ignited. At the same time, one shadow clone completed its seals and expelled a violent wind-release cyclone. The hurricane intensified the dragon of flame, blowing it outward and turning the training ground into an inferno. Grass and tall trees went up in flames as if the place itself were being purged. He can use a combination jutsu of this scale by himself? Sarutobi Shinji stared in disbelief. He had only seen that level of solo combined technique in the former Hiruzen Sarutobi. A deafening explosion rolled through the area. The ground couldn't withstand the impact and seemed to split. Smoke of different hues, black from burning, yellow from displaced earth, filled the air. The parasitic insects and earth release attacks hurtling at Mu Yue were incinerated or turned to dust by the heat. Even other fire techniques were overwhelmed by Mu Yue's superior flames. The combined ninjutsu of 29 Anbu and Root operatives were, for the moment, forced back. When the smoke thinned, the training ground was a wasteland. Craters and scorched earth testified to the destructive power just unleashed. Sarutobi Shinji's eyes sharpened as he realized Mu Yue had created only 2 shadow clones, one cooperating with the main body to execute the large-scale combination. The speed, control, and raw power Mu Yue had displayed left everyone on edge. 363. Mu Yue is the strongest among the younger generation? Ice Release, Savage Pheasant Beak. Before Sarutobi Shinji could finish sounding the alarm, a giant ice bird erupted from the still dissipating smoke. It struck with brutal force and an oppressive chill. A few shinobi who couldn't dodge or form hand signs in time tried to counter with taijutsu, only to be blown back and frozen solid into blocks of ice. 5 of them were caught off guard and frozen instantly. Those who weren't frozen breathed a quiet sigh of relief. The flames had barely cleared when that ice bird charged out. No one had expected an immediate follow-up like that. He actually has the ice release bloodline limit, Sarutobi Shinji exclaimed, staring at the frozen shinobi. He had never personally seen a user of ice release perform its techniques, but the effect and scope left no doubt. This was bloodline limit ice release. Shinji was baffled. Mu Yue was no stranger, yet a bloodline limit like this should have been recognizable. He couldn't recall ever having an impression of it. Shinji found himself admiring how well Mu Yue concealed his background. Even people from his own village were unaware. Hiruzen Sarutobi, watching through the crystal ball, nodded in acknowledgement of Mu Yue's ice release. Mu Yue had only fused with ice release after traveling to the snow country. To reach this level so quickly spoke to his extraordinary talent for ninjutsu. The other shinobi looked on in shock as well. This sudden display had blown past their expectations. They had little time to think, though. Mu Yue launched a new series of attacks. Whoosh! Mu Yue's main body flickered behind a Root operative and delivered a swift whirlwind kick. The Root shinobi barely registered the motion before the world around him spun. Ice Release, Freezing Ray. A shadow clone raised its hand and released a ray of bone-cold light that froze the kicked shinobi. In an instant, another student-side combatant was out of the fight. So strong. Not even on the same level, Feitian Shinji muttered, sweat beading on his brow as he watched Mu Yue cut through the ranks. Though he stood alone, Mu Yue utterly dominated the 30 elite shinobi arrayed against him. Feitian inhaled sharply and forced himself to calm down. Even if Mu Yue was their future instructor, it would be humiliating if so many Root and Anbu couldn't at least put a dent in him. They didn't expect to defeat him outright, but they should be able to make him look a little winded, not watch him walk through them without a crease in his clothes. The other Anbu and Root felt the same. Under the pressure of Mu Yue's strength, their coordination tightened. With the concerted effort of more than 20 elite shinobi, they managed to disperse Mu Yue's 2 shadow clones. Of course, Mu Yue allowed this. If even shadow clones could completely overwhelm Anbu and Root, it would seem excessive and unrealistic. He didn't want his clones to dominate too easily. Secret technique: Insect Tornado, Wind Release, Wind Cutter. Several shinobi attacked simultaneously to pin Mu Yue down. At the same instant, Feitian Shinji used his signature technique. Lightning Release, 4-Pillar Bind. As Feitian formed the seals, 4 massive stone pillars burst up around Mu Yue, and a dazzling web of electricity connected them, forming a cage. Another shinobi followed with Earth Release. Clay poured down over the cage, trying to seal Mu Yue in completely. They had underestimated his taijutsu. Golden Skyline. Mu Yue extended 2 fingers of his right hand, focused his rock breathing, and entered the transparent world state. He tucked his right hand behind his waist, bent his left leg slightly, and unleashed a burst of chakra as he lunged forward, slashing toward the stone pillar nearest him. A golden flash cut across the pillar, leaving a black mark. With a step, the 2 front pillars crumbled and the electric net collapsed. Mu Yue simply walked out of the lightning release cage. The clay then rained down as a backdrop, but he was already free. How is that possible? He destroyed my 4-pillar bind with taijutsu. Feitian Shinji's face registered shock he had never shown before. The 4-pillar bind, a barrier technique combined with earth release, was exceptionally sturdy, a tough nut even for high-level ninjutsu. Yet Mu Yue had broken its core with taijutsu alone. Feitian's worldview as a shinobi trembled. An unfamiliar style of taijutsu. Could he have developed it himself? If he keeps growing, he could rival the Raikage's Hell Stab. Even Hiruzen Sarutobi felt a flicker of surprise watching Mu Yue's golden skyline. Hiruzen knew the lightning 4-pillar bind well. It wasn't the most powerful, but its defensive sturdiness was notable. Mu Yue's golden skyline, though perhaps not as outwardly flashy as the wind and fire combination ninjutsu he used earlier, was far more lethal in the right circumstances. On a real battlefield against Root and Anbu, Mu Yue opening with golden skyline could have killed many. Some of the shinobi now felt lost. They had done their best and still couldn't dent him. Having demonstrated his ability, Mu Yue shifted to finishing the fight, and he did so quickly. Their genjutsu had no effect. Their combined ninjutsu couldn't match his, and their taijutsu was crushed. Before long, no shinobi on the field could remain standing. Wounded and conscious, the 30 sat together, some hanging their heads in embarrassment. 30 elite Anbu and Root members had been routed by one young man. Mu Yue produced shadow clones and healed their wounds. He controlled the strength of the medical chakra, but battle had still left injuries. Immediate treatment was necessary to avoid impairing later training. I'm generally clear on all of your strengths. You're better than most shinobi your age, but as Anbu, you still have shortcomings, Mu Yue said as he worked, pointing out tactical mistakes one by one. First and foremost, you underestimated your opponent. I told you to go all out, yet you didn't immediately press the attack. Feitian Shinji's expression remained awkward. This wasn't just a matter of pride. Who could have expected a 19-year-old like Mu Yue to possess such overwhelming power? Mu Yue's most notable record had been assisting Jiraiya in repelling a Jinchuriki, but the Leafs newspapers had never suggested he had this level of strength. Feitian compared Mu Yue, in his mind, to Minato Namikaze, the most famous youth in Konoha. Minato had more battle achievements, like single-handedly battling the new AB combo to a draw on the land of hot water. That feat alone made him famous across the shinobi world. Killer Bee wasn't notable then, but Fourth Raikaze I was a recognized powerhouse, famous for his ability to slay renowned fighters. Weighing them, Feitian felt Mu Yue was even more terrifying, a likely Sannin-level shinobi in 10 years. Mu Yue had noticed and corrected each individual's tactical errors during the fight, something Sarutobi Shinji considered uncanny. After the demonstration, the 30 were utterly convinced. Mu Yue was not only immensely strong but also a superb instructor. Such a teacher was rare. He didn't formally begin lecturing that first day. The injured needed rest, and the previous events had consumed a lot of time. Mu Yue guessed he wouldn't receive a lecture reward then and decided to delay formal teaching until the next day. With Mu Yue's treatment and the shinobi's elite constitutions, a day's rest was appropriate. Danzo Shimura, who lacked Hiruzen's crystal ball, ordered the root members who had witnessed the demonstration to report to him afterward. When he learned that Mu Yue, using only a single shadow clone and a combination ninjutsu, had blocked attacks from 30 root and Anbu, surprise crossed Danzo's face. He had seen some of Mu Yue's ninjutsu at Hiruzen's residence before and judged it strong, but a field demonstration carried more weight than isolated observation. One ninja killing 30 shinobi and one ninja overpowering 30 ninjutsu were two different things, especially when those 30 were root and Anbu. Hiruzen really values him, Danzo said, quickly attributing Mu Yue's development to Hiruzen's tutelage. Mu Yue hadn't known combination ninjutsu until he trained with Hiruzen, and the old Hokage had indeed taught him. Now Mu Yue was proficient in 5 chakra natures and combination techniques. The picture reminded Danzo of Hiruzen in his youth. A pity, he smiled involuntarily, thinking as a root leader, no matter how talented, Hayate Mugetsu remains my root property. The idea that Hiruzen's teaching had indirectly strengthened his own root gave Danzo a singular pleasure. He's even got the ice release bloodline limit. Danzo was more surprised upon hearing that detail. Mu Yue's parents and grandparents had no known bloodline limits, so how did ice release appear? Danzo was puzzled, but not suspicious. Mu Yue had been raised in Konoha. His parents had died in the war as Konoha shinobi, and Mu Yue had always behaved like a loyal member. If Mu Yue had been an orphan from outside the village, Danzo might have suspected a mist spy. He guessed, perhaps a distant ancestor once had ice release, or perhaps Mu Yue had somehow fused the nature himself. Bloodline limits were rare, but their value depended on the type. Ice release was middling. It didn't compare to the strategic power of the Byakugan or the sheer versatility of the Sharingan. To Danzo, the ultimate bloodline was wood release, invincible in his view. If he could find an undeveloped wood release talent in his custody and train them, Konoha would have few obstacles left. After the root report, Danzo mentally sized up Mu Yue. In single combat might not yet surpass Minato Namikaze, but his methods are more comprehensive. He could be comparable to a young Hiruzen. Those thoughts pleased Danzo. The next day, the training ground was the same, though yesterday's battle had damaged parts of it, and Mu Yue adjusted his position slightly. The same 30 shinobi gathered, but the mood had shifted. They were eager to learn. Speed is crucial in combat, Mu Yue began. Faster movement lets you dodge more attacks and seize initiative. Today, I'll teach you a body flicker technique. I developed this version myself. It places a lot of strain on the legs, but it's faster. He decided to teach a modified, weakened version of Soru. The core of Soru was its stackable chakra bursts. Mu Yue reduced the burst magnitude and greatly lowered the stacking limit for safety. Even weakened, his Soru remained far faster than a normal body flicker technique. Still an excellent technique. He demonstrated the speed, and the shinobi felt a familiar blur. After all, they'd seen him flicker around and strike them like that yesterday. They hadn't expected him to teach a personal creation outright. They had thought perhaps they'd get only general guidance. But Mu Yue was already showing the first lesson. 364. New Teaching Rewards. This body flicker technique is called shunpo. Its defining feature is that it stacks bursts to increase movement speed, Mu Yue began. It was, after all, a modified Soru, and the original name felt out of place in this world. He couldn't very well call it Mu Body Flicker or Yo Body Flicker, too pretentious, so shunpo would have to do. Because the bursts are stacked, the stress on the legs is much greater than with a normal body flicker, he added. The dozen or so ninja gathered below listened, puzzled by the phrase, stacked bursts. They knew how to concentrate chakra and release it for an ordinary body flicker, but they'd never heard it described as stacking bursts. Seeing they didn't quite follow, Mu Yue decided to demonstrate. He picked up a large leaf with his left hand and 3 smaller leaves with his right. He ignited the large leaf with fire release chakra and said, "This is a normal body flicker." Then, rapidly, he set the 3 smaller leaves alight with fire release. Though each small leaf was smaller than the big one, The combined blaze of the three dwarfed the single leaf's flame. Raising his right hand slightly, he declared, "And this is Shunpo." The visual clicked for them. They didn't grasp the full mechanics, but Mu Yue's demonstration gave them a clear idea of the development concept behind Shunpo. That was enough. This was obviously an advanced chakra control technique that couldn't be summarized in a few sentences. Mu Yue then launched into formal instruction. He broke down chakra control in detail and walked the students through the steps so carefully it felt like he was spoon-feeding them. That meticulous approach surprised and delighted many. Large group lessons with dozens of students were rarely taught this thoroughly. Such attention was normally reserved for one-on-one guidance. If on the first day Mu Yue had impressed them as a promising young shinobi, on the second day he proved himself a diligent, capable teacher. Newcomers to his class couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. The system's buffs, together with Mu Yue's previous life experience, made his teaching uniquely effective. Even Sarutobi Shinji, older than Mu Yue, found himself genuinely calling Mu Yue Teacher Mu Yue because of the effort he put into instruction. Mu Yue hardly rested through the day, personally guiding all 30 students. When the session ended, the system confirmed what he'd hoped for. Completed one intermediate lecture, initiating settlement. Evaluation. Reward, shadow imitation technique. First time completing intermediate class instruction, gains skill. Enlightenment. Allows one to enter a 48-hour enlightenment state. Weekly usage count is total disciple slots plus 1. Effect cannot be stacked. Usage count cannot be accumulated. Enlightenment state. Clear mind, increased comprehension, cannot re-enter enlightenment state for 5 days after the state ends. As expected, it's tied to the student's level, Mu Yue mused, scanning the black text. This course's description differed noticeably from earlier ones. It was clearly a higher tier, and so were the rewards. He'd never gotten secret technique ninjutsu from previous classes. Apparently, the regular class reward pool didn't include such rare techniques, except today's shadow imitation technique. Still, Mu Yue wasn't overly interested in shadow imitation. It leaned heavily towards support. What caught his attention was enlightenment. The name was humble, but its function was unmistakably a scholar's or teacher's skill, the sort of thing that could massively accelerate learning. The usage rule was obvious. Weekly uses equaled the total number of disciple slots, plus 1, the extra one clearly intended for the teacher. Mu Yue had 4 disciples listed on his panel, but the total slot count was 5, with 1 slot still unused. So his panel showed 6 remaining enlightenment uses. Back at home, he immediately used one on himself. The skill then began its refresh countdown. After 7 days, the UNT would reset to 6, assuming no change to disciple slots. At first, Mu Yue felt only a bit more alert. He immediately took out the Flying Thunder God Scroll to see if the buff could help him make progress. He studied for 2 hours, consulted Minato for another 2, and yet his proficiency still wouldn't budge from 0. 3 possible conclusions crossed his mind. The enlightenment effect was weak. He truly had no spatial temporal talent, and the skill couldn't manufacture talent out of nothing. Or both were true. To test it, he switched to ceiling technique and plunged into it for 3 hours. Once he started, he couldn't stop. He pushed through a small difficulty that had plagued him for a week, a snag in improving the yin seal. He exhaled and sipped hot tea. The learning boost from enlightenment isn't insignificant, he thought. He'd expected that problem would take at least 5 more days. Instead, he'd solved it in 3 hours. That didn't mean 8 hours in enlightenment equaled weeks of normal work, but it did prove the state's effectiveness. He studied until 3 a.m. before finally sleeping. He wished the buff could be paused. 2 nights lost to sleep felt like a waste, but he also knew he had to preserve his condition. He was busy with Anbu root training and teaching his disciples via shadow clone. He couldn't risk burning out for a few extra hours of study. He woke at 7:30 a.m., ate quickly, and went to the training ground for the 3rd day of instruction. By midday, he noticed his own understanding of Soru deepening in a way it hadn't before. He knew teaching and learning reinforced each other, but the effect was sharper this time, clearly the work of enlightenment. The students felt it too. Mu Yue was clearer, more energetic, and easier to understand. Completed 1 intermediate lecture. Reward, Inzuka-style beast mimicries. This reward confirmed his suspicion. Intermediate lecture rewards could include rare secret techniques. As the skill's memories flowed into his mind, information about beast mimicry ninjutsu filled his thoughts. The Inuzuka clan's technique primarily mimicked ninkin and, in chakra nature terms, was classed as yang release. It was mostly taijutsu focused. The mimicry strengthened the body and then used raw physical force. With the buff, Mu Yue could boost his sense of smell by orders of magnitude, enough to detect chakra strength, so it functioned as sensory ninjutsu as well. The yin-release Nara techniques and yang-release Inuzuka techniques seemed to be deeper arts than the 5 basic nature transformations. Mu Yue found himself wondering if one could develop beast mimicry to simulate mythical beasts. Early the next morning, at 6:50, Mu Yue went to the south border forest. He'd told his disciples via Shadow Clone to come early. Enlightenment uses didn't accumulate if unused, and it made sense to use them sooner rather than later. They arrived in various states of sleep and yawning. "Teacher Mu Yue, is today special?" "Why so early?" Obito asked, rubbing his eyes. "It's not special," Mu Yue said with a gentle smile. "I just think the weather's been good, perfect for training." Obito nodded. "It does feel good. Great for flame breathing." Metkai, stroking his chin, decided to tweak his training plan. Kakashi, Shisui, and others looked unbothered by the start time. Shizune, used to Tsunade's late mornings, found the early hour uncomfortable. She usually rose around 8:30 and had to rush through breakfast and travel. Mu Yue couldn't tell them about enlightenment, so he casually applied it to his students. Because one disciple slot remained unused, he had an extra enlightenment to assign. After thinking briefly, he gave that extra enlightenment to Shizune. She'd study with him for half a year, so it seemed warranted. He planned to use subsequent extras on Rin Nohara the next week, Rin again the 3rd week, and Asuma the 4th week. With enlightenment active, Mu Yue spent some time guiding Metkai on the 8 gates before moving to the training ground to teach the new lesson. The difference was immediate. Obito, who had been stuck on a flame-breathing problem for days, suddenly had a flash of insight mid-training. He realized the missing piece and dove into his drills with renewed intensity. "Kakashi, just wait. Once I perfect flame-breathing chakra mode, I'll trounce you right in front of Rin," he thought, fired up. Kakashi activated Transparent World and struck, the lightning blade clearing a 2-meter boulder in an instant. After the strike, he froze, pleasantly surprised. His 5 senses had opened a notch further. He'd caught a glimpse of Transparent World as used in a desperate burst and immediately focused on refining it. Shisui, pounding tree trunks in a stream of armament hockey, felt he'd found a trick to improve his success rate. He trained in bursts, apply hockey, refine chakra when it dipped, then resume. The constant, explosive practice seemed to yield results. Metkai laughed out loud during his own training. He believed he could master the 4th gate of the 8 gates within 3 days, though he planned to master Golden Skyline before putting Kakashi to the test. "Next time, the winner will be me," he joked to himself. Shizune, who'd considered sleeping in that morning, found herself unusually sharp, glancing at the others. Obito exuberant, Metkai energized, she tossed aside the idea of resting. She couldn't let herself fall behind. The early morning training had unexpectedly paid off for them all. 365. Metkai Life Mission Reward. I'm home. Metkai dragged himself through the door, exhausted from his afternoon training. He'd pushed himself harder than usual today because he was in particularly good form, and now paid for it in sheer fatigue. "Welcome home. Looks like another day full of youth." Maito Dai greeted him at the entrance. He saw Guy's tired face, clenched his fists with emotion, and his eyes shone. As a taijutsu practitioner who had trained for decades and shared every day with his son, Maito Dai knew how strong Guy's body was, and how much work it took to leave him this exhausted. Guy's tired expression brightened into a beaming smile at his father's words, and he gave a thumbs up. "We need to replenish properly today. Guy, come with me to buy groceries. Buy whatever you want. We're having a feast." Maito Dai wanted to reward his son for the hard training. Back when money had been tight, he'd scrimped to support Guy's training. Now that both of them could earn mission money, he felt it was time to spend a little more on food. Guy nodded. On the walk to the market, Maito Dai asked, "What kind of meat do you want?" "Beef," Guy said without hesitation. He could eat anything, beef, lamb, fish, pork, but if he had to pick, beef was his favorite. It was also the most expensive, so he'd rarely had it before. "All right, beef first." Maito Dai led him to the beef stall. "How much per gin?" 240 taels. "Will you take 210? I'll buy 4 gin. At 210 I make no profit. How about 230? 220. If not, I'll go look elsewhere." Maito Dai began to leave. "All right, 220. The vendor relented, took his knife out and began to chop. Maito Dai smiled triumphantly as if he'd won a duel. Even though their finances were better now, Maito Dai hadn't forgotten his old habit of managing the household carefully. Even grocery shopping, passionate youth must go all out, he declared, holding up the beef he had haggled for. Guy listened as if he'd learned something and chimed in to support his father's theatrics. Their green jumpsuits and their loud declarations drew some glances from other shoppers, this time no ridicule. After all, Maito Dai had risen to chuunin, and Guy had made his name in the chuunin exams as a taijutsu prodigy. It would be foolish to mock them. "Imagine raising a genius like Guy," some people murmured enviously. Though Maito Dai had once been a perennial genin and now appeared dwarfed by his son's fame, nobody voiced that thought aloud. Maito Dai didn't notice the whispers. He and Guy haggled their way through the market and returned home laughing, arms full of groceries. The meal was one of great satisfaction. Maito Dai's cooking wasn't as miraculous as Mu Yue's, but to Guy it was endlessly delicious. After eating and resting, they trained together, at Guy's insistence. His breakthrough through the 8 gates was approaching, and his father had practiced them for decades. His experience could be invaluable. Rock breathing, full concentration. 8 gates, gate of opening, open. Gate of healing, open. Gate of life, open. Guy pushed his breathing to the limit and opened the first 3 gates in quick succession. The power in him stirred the fallen leaves around them without wind. Feeling that raw force at close range, Maito Dai laughed aloud. He was honestly happy for his son. 8 gates. Gate of life. Open. Maito Dai opened the first 3 gates as well and launched himself at Guy. The tall and short green figures collided, fists and feet throwing up clouds of dust. "His punches are so hard," Maito Dai thought as he stepped back. Even with 3 gates open, he felt outclassed by Guy in strength and speed. When Guy flashed forward, Maito Dai realized he couldn't keep up and opened the 4th gate without hesitation. Guy had asked him to put pressure on him, so he had to be stronger. The 4th gate boosted Maito Dai's strength again, but even then, he still couldn't best Guy, who had only opened 3 gates and hadn't even used his leaf dragon god. "Ha, Guy, your youth truly exceeds my expectations." Maito Dai grinned, then excitedly pushed further. 8 gates, gate of limit, open. The 5th gate flared, and his aura surged. Guy's expression grew serious as Maito Dai bore down with 5 gates worth of power. They flickered through the trees, the ground and trunks trembling from their blows. When their fists met, the shock sent Guy sliding backward, digging his feet in to stop. He hadn't used any advanced ninjutsu learned from Mu Yue or Teacher Chen, only the basics of taijutsu, yet he stood firm, recalling what he had absorbed that day. 8 gates, gate of pain, open. Guy's eyes sharpened and he roared. His aura shifted as he withstood Maito Dai's 5-gate onslaught. Maito Dai ceased and looked at him with pride. "Guy, you're growing so fast, far faster than I expected." His smile faded into a more serious look. "But Guy, do you know what true strength is?" Maito Dai didn't want his son to become intoxicated with power and forget why he fought. To protect what's important until the very end. Guy answered without hesitation. He loved fighting Kakashi and enjoyed the thrill of besting him. But Guy believed true victory wasn't about defeating someone. It was about protecting what you cared about. He also understood the 8 gates were a forbidden, deadly technique. The earlier gates were manageable, but opening the 8th, the gate of death, meant certain death. Still, if faced with an enemy beyond Kakashi, Obito, or even Mu Yue, he would open that gate without hesitation to protect what mattered, even at the cost of his life. "You're already an excellent ninja," Maito Dai said, voice thick with feeling. He felt there was little left he could teach. For Guy to have mastered the 4th gate so quickly suggested he would surpass his father in mastering all 8. At that moment, Mu Yue's panel registered new progress tied to Guy's life mission. Disciple might. Guy's strength and reputation have risen, taking a small step toward becoming the strongest in Taijutsu. Progress reward, medium physical constitution enhancement, any type ninjutsu taijutsu extraction scroll, mastery level, Noon Tiger, mastery level. Mu Yue, who possessed transparent world and Byakugan, felt the reward immediately. His body sensed the enhancement. He hadn't expected a direct increase to his physical constitution. This was his first time gaining such a buff directly from the system. He judged the medium enhancement to be significant, about the equivalent of 3 months of training at constant rock breathing. Without a breathing technique, the same gain would take years, since Mu Yue's physical talent was average. Although the Noon Tiger mastery level reward was tempting, the extraction scroll drew Mu Yue's attention most. This any-type extraction scroll was unlike ordinary extraction scrolls. Any-type ninjutsu taijutsu extraction scroll, choose a ninjutsu taijutsu category to extract, high probability of obtaining high-level techniques. When he opened the scroll, many categories appeared and it even supported text search. He tried time first. If there was one abnormal ability across worlds, it would be time-related. Though he couldn't recall any time ninjutsu in the ninja world, this system covered many worlds. If time skills existed, they would be invaluable. No such type currently. Mu Yue shrugged. The scroll seemed confined to Naruto world types, so he chose space-time instead. The system note said there was a high chance of drawing a high-level jutsu. He hoped for something useful and clicked to start the extraction. A roulette spun and landed. Space-time ninjutsu extraction scroll consumed. Obtained space-time ninjutsu, Flying Thunder God Formation Technique, mastery level. Mu Yue blinked. Flying Thunder God Formation Technique, close to Flying Thunder God Technique, but not the same. He'd remembered the stories. Minato had wanted to teach the Flying Thunder God to his guards, but they hadn't been able to learn it. Instead, they led the formation technique, which required 3 people to cast together for teleportation. On the surface, that seemed useless for combat. How do 3 people fight hand in hand? So Mu Yue almost dismissed it. But as he sifted through memories, realization dawned. The mastery-level formation technique might not be as impractical as it first appeared. He marked the formation formula on his desk, walked south to a secluded grove, and set to work. Shadow Clone Technique. He created 2 clones. The 3 of them joined hands, gathered chakra, and cast the Flying Thunder God Formation Technique together. Whoosh. The next moment, Mu Yue found himself back in his home in the main district. It's a bit inconvenient, but I've got a long-distance instant movement skill, he thought. He hadn't wanted the technique for combat speed. His perfect-level lightning breathing made him fast enough. But for strategic teleportation, this was excellent. His panel showed another surprise. Skill, Flying Thunder God Technique, Beginner, 10-100. He had no proficiency in that technique before. Now it had 10%. Mu Yue connected the dots with other rewards and guessed correctly. The formation technique carried with it a bit of space aptitude, enough to seed some proficiency in the Flying Thunder God technique itself. Earlier system rewards had occasionally granted partial knowledge of chakra natures when Mu Yue had been given them. He suspected the same mechanism was at work here. After 2 hours of training with Minato, his Flying Thunder God proficiency rose another point. It wasn't much, but it was meaningful progress from absolute 0. Since he already had the formation technique, Mu Yue decided to treat learning Flying Thunder God casually, grind it up to beginner level at his own pace, then use proficiency scrolls to push it to mastery later. With the time freed, he turned back to researching breathing techniques, aiming to develop a variant with a high base and a low ceiling for training purposes. Although Mu Yue had already developed a basic breathing technique that granted a modest overall boost, he refused to teach it to non-disciples unless he trusted them completely. The basic breathing technique didn't provide a huge advantage by itself, but it was a cornerstone of all breathing techniques and had enormous developmental potential. Every other breathing technique Mu Yue created began from that basic form. To use numbers as an analogy, mastering the basic breathing technique up to the constant state might only give Root or Anbu members a 60-point increase in combat power. But if a genius on Hiruzen Sarutobi and Danzo Shimura's side discovered the basic technique's deeper potential and developed something like Mu Yue's rock breathing or lightning breathing, the ceiling would soar, possibly producing a technique that boosted combat power by 500 points. Mu Yue didn't underestimate the ninja of the ninja world just because he was a transmigrator with a system. A powerful shinobi like Senju Tobirama had created countless strong ninjutsu and forbidden techniques. Given a basic breathing technique, Mu Yue believed Tobirama could forge an entirely new forbidden jutsu. If Mu Yue taught the basic breathing technique to Root and Anbu members, and a genius later refined it into a more advanced breathing technique that would risk empowering his enemies, an outcome Mu Yue would not accept. Right now, Mu Yue had no open conflict with senior Konoha officials such as Hiruzen Sarutobi or Danzo Shimura. Root and Anbu were not his enemies, but he could not predict the future. The next breathing technique Mu Yue wanted to develop would give only a 100-point increase at mastery. There was no path to push it further. Teaching something more powerful might yield better rewards and avoid strengthening potential foes, so he naturally chose to keep developing new breathing techniques. With his experience and his enlightenment state, doing so was not difficult. Minato-sensei. On the training ground, Kakashi, Obito, and the others greeted Minato with smiles. With Metgai's matter resolved, Mu Yue's small special training goal was complete. A few days later, Mu Yue announced the end of the special training. Everyone returned to their teams except Shisui, who hadn't graduated yet. "I'm sorry," Minato said with a rueful expression. "As a teacher, I wasn't as capable as Mu Yue." Though Minato was the guiding teacher, it had mostly been Mu Yue helping Obito and the others grow. "It's different," Obito replied. "Besides, Minato-sensei, you were on missions protecting the village. You don't need to feel bad about that." Rin Nohara agreed. She should have been studying with Tsunade, her mentor, but she'd gotten a day off to be with Minato's group. "Not taking us on missions was for our safety too," Kakashi added. In Kakashi's eyes, Minato was a reliable ninja, and he understood Minato's decision. Hearing them, Minato finally broke into a genuine smile. He felt the joy of being a teacher. "Are we training today or going on a mission?" Obito asked, seeing Minato in a better mood. "Let's train first. I'll test your current strength," Minato decided after a moment. Not much time had passed, and by ordinary growth standards, there wouldn't be much change, but Kakashi and Obito weren't ordinary. Minato chose to hold a combat training test. "Are we fighting you, Minato-sensei?" Obito scratched his head. He didn't actually want to fight Minato. Fighting him would be frustrating. Minato could easily pummel them without giving them a chance to land a blow. Minato nodded. Obito then suggested, "Could you find us a Konoha Jonin? Fighting different opponents helps train adaptability." From his internship onward, Obito had fought several Jonin and still felt he could look good against another. Minato agreed. He had many Jonin friends and quickly went to fetch one. He found Deikai, who was also in Jiraiya's circle and happened to be at home. "Help test my disciple's strength?" Deikai agreed without hesitation. "Don't hold back too much. My disciples are strong," Minato warned. Deikai laughed and punched Minato lightly on the chest. In Dekai's mind, even if Minato's pupils were talented, they'd only recently graduated. Deikai was a strong Jonin and didn't expect to be troubled by a few youngsters. Minato used the Flying Thunder God technique to bring Deikai back to the training ground. Obito and Kakashi greeted him. Deikai was familiar to them from past battles. Deikai slapped both on the shoulders with a big laugh. "Obito, you became a chuunin so fast," Deikai said, surprised by Obito's vest. "The chuunin exams weren't that hard," Obito replied modestly. Seeing Rin with them, Deikai added, "I'll have to use more force then." He assumed Rin was a support-type medical ninja. Obito explained they'd met Deikai on the battlefield during their intern days. Rin nodded. That made sense. When it was time to begin, Deikai warned, "I specialize in lightning release ninja body technique. It's powerful. If any of you can't continue, withdraw immediately or you'll get hurt." "Don't worry," Obito said proudly. "Rin's medical ninjutsu is excellent. She can heal us if we're injured." "If her healing is so great, then don't try to be tough when you're hurt," Rin protested. "That's because I wasn't hurt." Obito stammered, blushing. He didn't like admitting pain. He wanted to look good in front of Rin. Minato shouted, "Training start." "Flame breathing, full concentration," Obito called. "Lightning breathing, full concentration," Kakashi answered. Both boys concentrated their breathing techniques. Kakashi had never seen Dekai's full power. During his spar with Metkai, Dekai had held back. Rin was studying medical ninjutsu with Tsunade, and Obito wanted to impress her, so he went all out. Flame-breathing chakra mode, Obito pushed his breathing to the limit. Chakra surged through his body and his aura spiked. Dekai didn't make the first move. As a jonin facing a group of juniors under 10, he assumed he could gauge the situation. But Obito's intense heat made Dekai uneasy. The boy standing opposite him felt far beyond a recent graduate. Fire release. Great fireball technique. Obito formed hand signs and converted a large amount of chakra into fire, launching a massive blazing fireball at Dekai. Dekai, surprised by the fireball's strength, almost suspected the Uchiha before him was a jonin using the transformation technique. He decided not to block such a large avoidable ninjutsu and prepared to dodge, condensing chakra in his feet. Flash! At that instant, Kakashi drew his white fang short sword, channeling chakra into lightning to boost his legs, and charged. The coordination required no words, only a glance. If Obito's aura had surprised Dekai, Kakashi's speed truly shocked him. A combined strike from two youngsters struck Dekai's arm. He felt blood. For a moment, he couldn't believe it. He was a jonin, and he'd just been cut by a child. Embarrassed and wary, Dekai abandoned contempt and decided to get serious. He scanned the three and formulated a plan, then released chakra and surged forward. Lightning release enhanced his speed even though his build was stocky. Obito activated his Sharingan to sharpen his vision. Kakashi condensed chakra to assist. Just as Dekai neared Obito, Obito had already gathered a huge ball of flame and Kakashi was sending lightning forward. Dekai abruptly slammed on the brakes and slammed a lightning-infused punch into the ground. Boom! The explosion blew apart the earth and sent debris flying. Dekai then pivoted and charged at Rin, throwing a heavy punch. Because Rin hadn't attacked earlier and was known as a medical ninja, Dekai assumed she was strictly a support specialist. He didn't bother to strengthen himself with chakra and aimed to take her down with a bare fist. Obito's Sharingan saw the move, and for a heartbeat, Obito pitied Dekai for underestimating Rin. Strength of 100 technique, Rin condensed a massive amount of chakra into her fist and met Dekai's blow. The impact contorted Dekai's face. The slender girl's body erupted with monstrous power. Dekai, relying on his own conditioning, held on for a moment before being thrown backward by the force. Dekai looked back at Minato with resentment. Was this what Minato meant by quite good? Obito and Kakashi seized the opening. Obito unleashed a torrent of flames that engulfed Dekai from multiple angles. Kakashi entered his transparent world state, converting chakra to lightning to strengthen his body, poured all his power into his white fang short sword, and locked onto Dekai. Cough, cough, training over? Minato coughed twice and called an early end to the session. You didn't have the information, Minato told Dekai kindly. Dekai's loss had come from underestimating and from a lack of intel. If he'd known Obito and Kakashi were that strong, or that Rin could hit like that, he would have acted differently. Still, the sting of defeat lingered. He had lost to 3 children under 10. They were even his friend's disciples. Dekai left the training ground looking dejected. If you need me again, tell me. I'll bring Izumo Kamizuki next time, he called back. The idea of bringing his friend made him feel better. At least next time, Dekai would arrive prepared. Minato smiled and nodded. Since Dekai's match had ended too quickly, Minato prepared to step in himself. 367. The powerful flying thunder god. In the end, I still have to fight Minato-sensei. Obito sighed inwardly as he watched Minato smile. He kept his guard up. After today's training, Rin would return to Lady Tsunade to study, and he wouldn't see her for a while. He wanted to leave an impression on her. Kakashi, too, watched Minato closely. As Minato's student, he had done many missions with him and knew exactly how terrifying Minato's strength could be. Even facing someone as fearsome as a Raikage candidate, Minato could still lead everyone to retreat safely. Start. As soon as Minato gave the signal, a storm of shuriken and a giant fireball flew toward him. Calmly, Minato tossed 5 flying thunder god kunai in different directions. Kakashi frowned. That was the unsolvable aspect of Flying Thunder God. No matter how fast you were, you couldn't be everywhere at once. Kakashi's mind raced. He guessed Minato would first move to Rin, the medical ninja, so he pushed his speed to the limit and tore toward the kunai closest to her. Obito and Rin had already grasped how the Flying Thunder God worked, so they backed away a distance as soon as Minato threw the kunai. Whoosh! Minato anticipated Kakashi and shifted to the kunai near Obito. Then, at blinding speed, hurled out 3 more Flying Thunder God kunai, each aimed at one of them. While those kunai flew, Minato activated Flying Thunder God and blinked next to Rin and Kakashi. Fire Release, Phoenix Sage Fire Technique. Worried for Rin, Obito spat a barrage of small fireballs at Minato's last known position. What he didn't expect was that Minato only appeared for an instant before vanishing again, and then reappeared beside a kunai that was already flying toward him. Obito's pupils constricted. He couldn't afford to be careless with Minato. Obito immediately entered flame-breathing chakra mode and activated his Sharingan. The Sharingan let him see what was happening, but his body couldn't react quickly enough. Bang! Minato's solid palm strike sent Obito flying 3 meters before he crashed heavily to the ground. Only then did Kakashi realize how restrained Minato had been when they'd been fighting for the bells. Minato could chain Flying Thunder God movements in such rapid succession that, without Transparent World, one would only register his arrival after he had already left. That was how terrifying his speed was. Water Release, Water Dragon Bullet Technique. Rin formed hand signs and condensed a water dragon that surged at Minato. Minato's figure flickered. He disappeared from his previous spot and materialized next to the first kunai he had thrown, easily avoiding the water dragon bullet. Kakashi's eyes flashed. A bold plan formed. He looked at Obito, who had just flipped to his feet, and signaled with a finger, pointing to the ground and to Minato. Obito didn't know every detail of Kakashi's idea, but he understood the gist. Fire Release, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet. Because he'd activated flame-breathing chakra mode early, Obito converted most of his chakra into Fire Release chakra and exhaled it. His chakra drained rapidly. The flames he expelled grew into a roaring sea of fire, burning with terrifying intensity. The blaze covered all the Flying Thunder God kunai. With precise control, Obito split that sea of fire into 3 streams, rushing toward Minato. This was Obito going all out. After this, he would have maybe 10% of his chakra left. He knew it wouldn't be enough to beat Minato, and if they lost, he was already primed to blame Kakashi for persuading him. The flames engulfed the area and even seemed to cover Minato himself. Kakashi, however, focused all his energy. Lightning Release shimmered over his body, a bright yellow glow that stabbed through the surrounding red inferno. He used the Lightning Release to vitalize his body and boost his strength, pushed his breathing technique to the edge, and then, with Transparent World integrating everything, readied a single concentrated strike. Just as Obito stared through his Sharingan to see the flames had struck Minato, a figure silently appeared behind him. Lightning Flash! Kakashi unleashed everything. The White Fang short sword became a blade of lightning, and Kakashi himself became a flash, striking the figure behind Obito. A thunderous crack split the air. Dazzling electric light seemed to tear everything apart. Minato's arrival and Kakashi's attack happened in an instant. Even though the blow wasn't aimed at him, Obito's heart hammered a warning. Kakashi was dangerously close. Minato offered a faint, approving smile as the lightning blade neared him. But then a kunai sliced through the flames and flew over the assault. Whoosh! Boom! A thunderous impact as lightning struck the ground. A long, charred slash cut through the earth behind Obito. Under Kakashi's control, not even Obito's clothes were electrified. Then a violent force struck Kakashi from behind and sent him crashing to the ground. Obito, using his last reserves of chakra, threw a desperate fire punch at Minato. Whoosh! Minato's figure flickered. He reappeared behind Obito and returned the blow, also sending Obito sprawling. At that moment, Rin reached them, her water breathing at full intensity, and launched an attack at Minato. Minato wanted to show them he was strong even without relying on Flying Thunder God. In less than 3 minutes, all 3, Obito, Kakashi, and Rin, were lying neatly on the ground. The Sharingan's copying ability is so useless. It says it can copy ninjutsu, but it can't copy anything powerful, Obito complained. He'd once tried to copy Mu Yue's other breathing technique chakra modes and failed. He'd failed to copy armament haki, and he couldn't copy Minato's flying thunder god either. He couldn't understand what the Sharingan's copying was actually for. Was it only for simple ninjutsu? Actually, most ninjutsu can be copied, but my flying thunder god just happens not to be one of them, Minato said with a smile, trying to comfort him. Obito, you need to pay more attention to details in battle. Minato reviewed the fight. When I hit you, I actually placed a flying thunder god mark on you, but you didn't notice it. Kakashi did. Learn from Kakashi in that regard. Still, your teamwork was very good. Obito, you were decisive in your attacks and your fire release was very skilled. That's impressive. After pointing out the shortcoming, Minato immediately praised Obito. The fire release had been genuinely powerful, stronger than during the chuunin exams, evidence of serious training. Obito let out a small chuckle. Kakashi, you did well. The moment you realized Obito was marked, you came up with a counter and acted on it, but perhaps you overlooked Rin. Your coordination with her was lacking. Minato raised Kakashi's flaw. To Minato, Kakashi had only a few minor issues. Overall, he was Jonin material. Whether in raw skill, problem-solving, or tactics, Kakashi was excellent. The reason they lost was the gap in power, not Kakashi's mistakes. To Minato, killing a regular Jonin would be as easy as killing a Genin. Kakashi nodded, accepting the criticism. He had indeed underestimated Rin. It wasn't personal. He simply assumed Rin, as a medical 9 and part-time support, wouldn't be much use in an unequal fight. Even if he integrated her strength now, the outcome likely wouldn't change. The gap to Minato was too large. If his teammate had been Metkai, Kakashi would have adopted a completely different strategy. Guy's raw power was comparable and would have helped. Rin, your medical ninjutsu is improving. Keep training, and you might become an extraordinary medical ninja like Lady Tsunade, Minato encouraged, as Rin tended to Kakashi and Obito. Rin's expression was complicated. Before spending time with Tsunade, she would have gratefully accepted the praise. But time with Tsunade had broken the naive idol image. Rin still respected Tsunade as a great medical ninja, but becoming Tsunade herself felt impossible. She didn't want to be someone who woke up at noon with a hangover. I'll work harder, Rin said with determination. She knew she had held them back. After returning, she would study medical ninjutsu even more diligently. Minato relaxed and reminded them of a few practical things. Obito's powerful fire release and Kakashi's lightning slashes both drained a lot of chakra and stamina. They should be used sparingly in a real battle. Obito already knew that. Mu Yue had told him countless times. But today, training and a desire to look impressive had led him to activate flame-breathing chakra mode. In a real fight, he would only use it at a critical moment. Flame-breathing steadily consumes chakra even while idle, and performing ninjutsu on top of that drained him faster still. 368. Developed breathing techniques, Land of Water. Hidden Mist Village, Mizukage Building, Conference Room. According to the latest intelligence, Konoha drove Kumogakure out of the Land of Hot Water. Kumogakure has fallen back to its own borders, reported the leader of the Hidden Mist Anbu. Iwagakure and Konoha are still clashing in the Land of Grass, and Konoha keeps the upper hand. The war between Kumogakure and Tsunagakure, a middle-aged shinobi muttered. The Anbu leader read the continent's updates without hurry. Konoha is pulling ahead again. They're being attacked on two fronts and still winning repeatedly. As fellow members of the 5 great shinobi villages, why is Konoha so much stronger than Iwagakure and Kumogakure? Is Konoha that powerful, or are the others simply weak? A serious-faced, middle-aged ninja frowned. Because of the ocean barrier, the Land of Water rarely involved itself in continental affairs. The trips were troublesome. But with productivity rising and the times changing, that isolation was breaking down. Just because Konoha keeps winning doesn't mean they can handle 2 enemies at once, a bandage-masked ninja offered. Neither Kumogakure nor Iwagakure are using their full strength in these fights. We shouldn't overestimate Konoha. Iwagakure and Kumogakure may not be at full strength, but who says Konoha is? The serious man retorted. Konoha's strength is too great. If we want advantages on the continent, we must first weaken Konoha. Genyu. Do you think Konoha is strong? The third Mizukage asked, opening his eyes slightly as he looked at Genyu, seated to his right. His voice silenced the room. Everyone stopped talking and watched them. Those who knew the third Mizukage knew his smile was a mask. Treating him like a kindly old man could be dangerous. I can only offer conjecture, Genyu replied. I did visit Konoha, but why would they reveal their true strength to me? He had been intimidated by the third Hokage's aura and only observed Genin matches firsthand, so his intelligence was limited. In terms of overall power, I believe Konoha remains the strongest village in the world, Genyu concluded. The higher-ups turned to him, waiting. They listened because Genyu was speaking. If anyone else had said it so plainly, the others would have argued. As peers in the 5 great villages, openly admitting another village's superiority without a war felt like conceding defeat before it began. Strategy usually called for downplaying the enemy. Because of an unexpected circumstance, I once had a clash of auras with the third Hokage, Genyu added tactfully. He is very strong, no weaker than the third Mizukage. Hiruzen Sarutobi's true strength outmatched the Mizukage's, but this was a high-level council, and Genyu chose to soften the comparison. Those who had risen to such ranks were not stupid. They read the implication. Several faces shifted subtly, then relaxed. At the 5 Kage level, even if one was slightly weaker, it was rarely by much. If you couldn't win outright, you could at least hold the opponent back. There had been outliers, like Senju Hashirama, but they were rare enough to be dismissed. The third Mizukage's smile did not change. His eyes narrowed, revealing nothing. Despite bringing some outstanding genin and several youths above genin rank, none reached the final round, Genyu continued. In the youthful contests, we already lost. It's notable that Konoha held a chuunin exam while fighting on 2 fronts. That shows a certain confidence in their strength. The Mizukage closed his eyes and considered. So the current Konoha is indeed very strong, he said slowly. How should we position ourselves against such a village? 2 weeks after the Shunpo training, Mu Yue finished developing the breathing technique for training purposes. It had progressed faster than he expected. The moment of enlightenment was potent and aided the development. Rather than begin training right away, he went to the third Hokage's office. Mu Yue, any trouble with your work? Hiruzen Sarutobi asked, setting down his papers and smiling. Mu Yue's eagerness to teach and to spread the body flicker technique the third Hokage had entrusted him with pleased Hiruzen. It showed he took the task seriously. Mu Yue shook his head and respectfully handed 2 scrolls to Hiruzen. These are 2 taijutsu I developed. I would like to offer them to the village. A faint glow passed across Mu Yue's features. He was glad to contribute to Konoha. Mu Yue, you have a good heart, Hiruzen said, stroking his goatee. Whatever their power, Hiruzen appreciated the gesture. The 5 D-rank ninjutsu Mu Yue had submitted earlier had already been added to Konoha's library. The techniques I've submitted are nothing compared to the ones the village has already given me, Mu Yue said modestly. If he used the breathing technique to train Anbu and Root, it would effectively become village property, so he felt he ought to submit it properly, and perhaps qualify for the reward the village offered for new techniques. He also planned to notify Danzo to keep up appearances. Hiruzen opened the scrolls. One described Shunpo, the other detailed something called the darkness breathing technique. Hiruzen skimmed both and found the darkness breathing technique rich in substance. As he read, Mu Yue explained. Shunpo is straightforward, Mu Yue said, briefly covering it before turning to the more complex technique. The darkness breathing technique strengthens the body by absorbing large amounts of oxygen. The more focused the breathing, the greater the enhancement. It increases overall physical strength and speeds recovery when injured. It can also accumulate breathing power to produce instantaneous bursts, enabling attacks that far exceed one's normal strength. Strengthening and faster recovery were standard features of breathing techniques. Mu Yue's key change was to de-emphasize long-term training benefits and instead amplify the immediate power when the technique was activated. The darkness breathing technique therefore doesn't have a constant state realm. It's more like an explosive secret technique than a steady enhancer. Compared to ordinary breathing techniques, it is geared toward intense, short-lived surges. Hiruzen, who had mastered thousands of ninjutsu but also knew taijutsu well, quickly saw the best use: surprise attacks and assassinations. Drawing on strength beyond the body's natural limits carries a cost, and the darkness breathing technique couldn't be sustained for long. In general combat, it could be useful, but for cost-effectiveness, sudden strikes and assassination missions were ideal. A taijutsu full of clever ideas, Hiruzen praised. Mu Yue had taken a different path from most of Konoha's taijutsu inventors. His creativity and talent for technique development were stronger than Hiruzen had expected. Shunpo can be rated as B-rank taijutsu, and the darkness breathing technique as A-rank, Hiruzen decided after some thought. The rank mainly reflected learning difficulty. All Konoha techniques were classified this way. Higher difficulty usually implied greater power, though lower-rank techniques were not necessarily weak. The fire-release Great Fireball technique was only C-rank yet widely used from academy students to jonin. Mu Yue nodded. He had intentionally kept the darkness breathing technique simple, and S-rank would have been problematic. I plan to use the darkness breathing technique for training, Mu Yue said. It's especially suitable for Anbu and Root. Haha, then I'll look forward to your trials in 2 months. Hiruzen replied with a laugh, exhaling visible breath. Anbu and Root members were hard to gather for tests, so Mu Yue would schedule the exam for the final day of the special training to display the results. In 2 months, if you want to consult any ninjutsu, go to the ninjutsu pavilion. If what you need isn't there, come to me to apply, the third Hokage added. Hiruzen decided to grant Mu Yue the authority to freely consult the ninjutsu pavilion. Mu Yue's current merits might not justify such access, but Hiruzen was impressed with his talent and diligence. Granting you this now may raise questions, Hiruzen explained, but once the training finishes and everyone sees your ability, there will be no problem. The reward was generous, but it was also a way to motivate Mu Yue to teach more enthusiastically. Thank you, third Hokage-sama, Mu Yue said, smiling with gratitude. Inside, he was relieved. He would no longer have to hide most of his discoveries, except for a few especially sensitive techniques. Hiruzen's generosity was greater than Mu Yue had expected, and he left the office feeling both honored and eager to begin. 369. Yang Seal. Today I'll teach everyone a new body flicker technique. This one's a bit harder than Shunpo. If you have any questions while I'm teaching, ask me directly, Mu Yue told the gathered ninja. Although Mu Yue had simplified the darkness breathing technique, it remained an A-rank technique. Under Konoha's ranking system, B-rank counted as high-level ninjutsu. A-rank was super high-level. The 30 training ninja shifted in their seats at Mu Yue's announcement, some curious if he'd developed the technique himself, others quietly pleased, since a harder technique usually meant more power. This body flicker technique is called the darkness breathing technique. It's an A-rank body flicker technique I developed. Its main feature is to strengthen the body through a focused breathing method, Mu Yue summarized without trying to be mysterious. Sarutobi Shinji felt a new respect for Mu Yue when he learned that. Even among A-rank skills, the darkness breathing technique stood out for improving both raw strength and recovery speed. A technique that would normally be reserved for disciples, or at least the core ones chosen to inherit a teacher's style, but Mu Yue was teaching it in a large training class. From Shinji's perspective, that was admirable. The other Root and Anbu ninjas were similarly surprised. They had expected Shunpo in the program, but not something clearly superior. The most important part of the darkness breathing technique is the breathing. At first, you'll need to adopt a specific posture to get used to its rhythm, Mu Yue began the lesson. Teaching elite Root and Anbu was easier than teaching Obito, and the others had been. These were experienced operatives who could hold precise positions for long periods. By the afternoon session, Mu Yue used the appraisal technique and found that the whole group had already shown some proficiency in the darkness breathing technique. A few even had 2 points. Mu Yue smiled inwardly. His modifications had worked. This version was indeed much easier to learn than a traditional breathing technique. He remembered how Obito, who was exceptionally compatible with flame breathing, had only reached 1 point after 3 days when he first began. These Root and Anbu had shown similar progress in just half a day. By the end of the week, the fastest student had 3 points. The rest had at least 1, most around 2. Completed a mid-level lecture. Reward: breathing technique comprehension increase, darkness breathing technique plus 50, basic breathing plus 25, lightning breathing plus 12. As I thought, Mu Yue murmured, even with a limited number of students, if the students were strong and the content high quality, an S-rank evaluation was still attainable. He'd now roughly figured out the 3 elements that produced an S-rank lecture: number of students, students' level, and teaching quality. The more of these met, the higher the chance of S-rank. During the holiday special training, the students had been weaker overall, but there were so many of them that it still reached S. Mu Yue glanced at the reward details. The content-based increases, darkness breathing rising, basic and lightning breathing nudged up, made sense. The special item, breathing technique comprehension increase, intrigued him. Proficiency points were one thing, but the system listing comprehension increase separately suggested something deeper. He then had an idea for wind breathing development and checked his panel. All his breathing techniques had gained a small proficiency boost. The reward really did deepen understanding, not just add points, helpful for discovering new insights. Mu Yue continued teaching the breathing technique for a week. On the second Monday, he skipped breathwork and taught chakra nature transformation for a day. Body flicker needs solid training, but we can't neglect ninjutsu, he explained as the reason. It was also an experiment. He wanted to compare S-rank rewards for a mid-level class with those for a regular course. None of the ninja complained. Most already knew basic nature transformation, but few had the level Mu Yue demonstrated. They still remembered his fire release that had absorbed every attack. Rating S. Reward: chakra nature transformation comprehension increase. Lightning release chakra nature transformation plus 20. Earth release plus 18. Water release plus 13. Fire release 9. Looking at the settlement, Mu Yue confirmed that lecture content comprehension increase was a special mid-level S-rank reward. Even ice release rose a little, only a dozen points, but it suggested he might develop a new bloodline limit by grinding mid-level S-ranks. He wasn't interested in more bloodline limits right now. They wouldn't bring enough benefit. Instead, he wanted to grind rewards that would speed up his sealing technique development. Teaching sealing in this training would have been awkward. Sealing wasn't a required subject, so he'd held off. He didn't want to damage his image for a small gain. The enlightenment skill had already sped his research, and time moved into mid-November. A month of training with the root and anbu had them making solid progress. Most could use shunpo, and darkness breathing technique was about half-mastered by many. Mu Yue himself had gained much. The A-rank evaluations had unlocked secret techniques from the Inoshika-cho and Inuzuka clans. The S-ranks had accelerated his wind-breathing development. He estimated he could finish wind-breathing in 2 weeks and then move on to sun-breathing. Best of all, his sealing technique power bank plan had finally advanced. He spread a pile of draft papers on his desk and smiled. Let's call it the Yang seal. Using existing ninjutsu as reference, Mu Yue had designed a Yang seal to complement the Yin seal. It was only semi-finished, mainly because the Yin seal itself was still incomplete. The Yang seal lacked a ninjutsu analog to mitotic regeneration to pair with it. He had some ideas. Bind the Yang seal to the breathing technique. Out of combat, the Yang seal would emit a faint chakra to enhance the breathing technique's constant state effect, improving physical performance. In combat, it would fully activate, automatically entering the breathing technique's marked state. The chakra cost of the marked state would be terrifying, but if the Yang seal could supply and sustain that state in combat, it would be like having an ultimate move stored up that didn't consume the wielder's chakra daily. The idea was promising, but how to bind sealing technique and breathing technique remained a major hurdle. Mu Yue didn't like wasting resources, so in the afternoon he went straight to Tsunade's house. Many joked that Tsunade had turned her grandfather's passive ability into an ultimate move, but Mu Yue thought Tsunade, who had developed mitotic regeneration, was a genius at ninjutsu and had knowledge he lacked. Mu Yue, you're here. Tsunade, sprawled on her sofa contemplating life, brightened when she saw him and took his bag. Show me what treats you brought. No chicken, but there's beef, he said. That'll do. Tsunade went into the kitchen to unpack, while Shizune set 2 cups of tea on the table. Mu Yue asked, Lady Tsunade, I've been thinking about the automatic healing ninjutsu we discussed, the one to go with the yin seal. Can we talk about it? Tsunade slouched back on the sofa and sipped her tea. You tell me. I'd almost forgotten about it. She wasn't keen on boosting her own combat power. She no longer wanted to fight. If Mu Yue hadn't brought it up, she'd only consider such work when truly bored. Mu Yue patiently laid out his thoughts, drawing on his impressions of mitotic regeneration and his medical ninjutsu knowledge. At first, Tsunade barely reacted, still slouched, but as she listened, she sat up straighter. He had really thought it through. This was no idle idea. You don't have to be so fixated on it, Tsunade said, rubbing her hair. You can't even practice the yin seal, and the technique doesn't mean much to me. Mu Yue's competence made her uncomfortable. She liked slacking off. I've developed a yang seal similar to the yin seal, Mu Yue continued. The yang and yin seals share similar flaws, and I think this direction will help me develop a complementary ninjutsu for the yang seal. He handed over a scroll. Tsunade unrolled it and read carefully. Familiar with the yin seal, she felt a shiver of recognition. You must have put the yin seal next to it while you developed this, she quipped, but she was impressed. Even if he'd imitated some structure, it was still a genuine S-rank sealing technique. In the short time since she'd given Mu Yue access to the yin seal, he'd managed to replicate something with similar function. He had a real talent for sealing. Tsunade frowned with a kind of exhausted amusement. So tiring, she muttered. The thought of getting back to serious research drained her will to laze around. She looked at Shizune and asked, Shizune, am I good to you? Will you really listen to me? Shizune smiled. Yes, Lady Tsunade is very good to me. Of course I'll listen. Despite Tsunade's hangovers and tendency to oversleep, the girl under 10 had taken care of her, and Shizune felt a familial warmth. Tsunade's slack side was endearing in its own way. All right then, Tsunade declared suddenly. I order you to reach my level in medical ninjutsu within a week, and then research ninjutsu with Mu Yue. Shizune blinked, bewildered. Had Tsunade been drinking when she said that? Don't make things hard for Shizune, Mu Yue protested. Lady Tsunade, if you don't want to do this, I'll just come less often. Tsunade's expression twisted. On one side, she had the comfortable drunk life of daily leisure. On the other, a normal life with good food, but the obligation to restart research. It was a difficult choice. Let's leave it to luck. One roll of the dice, she decided finally. If I win, I'll fully help you develop the ninjutsu you envision. If I lose, we'll pretend none of this ever happened, and you can keep coming to learn medical ninjutsu like before. Tsunade loved gambling, though she was painfully aware of her luck. Others lost 9 times out of 10, but she seemed to lose all the time. If she somehow won this time, she would be truly speechless. 370. Tsunade's luck. Lady Tsunade's odds of winning felt like a losing streak written in stone. She was convinced she would lose before the dice had even been shaken. What she didn't know was that Mu Yue could never reliably beat her at dice, because he had a cheat. Hidden behind his glasses, he could quietly activate his Byakugan and see straight through the dice. Then thank you, Lady Tsunade, for winning and still agreeing to help me, Mu Yue said with a smile. Even though he had the means to cheat, Mu Yue had no intention of turning on the Byakugan right away. He'd already benefited a great deal from Tsunade. If she truly refused to help him, he wouldn't force her. He was patient. Without her assistance, it would only take a bit longer. Tsunade felt mocked but had no proof. Mu Yue had never been with her to a casino, and few people in Konoha knew of her notorious gambling bad luck. Still, Tsunade wasn't one to overthink things. She slapped Mu Yue on the back and laughed. Of course. Otherwise, how would I teach you medical ninjutsu? Mu Yue smiled faintly. He kept the constant state of rock breathing up for defense, and Tsunade's backhand had been playful rather than serious. Your conditioning is good, he commented. Tsunade eyed the solid muscle at her palm and raised an eyebrow. She'd only used a little force. It was near dinner time, and she didn't want to waste Mu Yue's evening, so she called Shizune to bring the dice cup and tools. Clatter, clatter, the dice rattled as Tsunade shook the cup. Have you ever been to a casino? She asked. No, Mu Yue answered. Neither in his former life nor in this world had he been to a casino. At most, he'd played liar's dice with friends in a KTV. A novice, huh? Then congratulations in advance. Novices usually have good luck, Tsunade chuckled. She explained the rules quickly. 5 dice total. Below 17 is small. 17 or above is large. The correct guess wins. Bang! She slammed the cup down and said, Since you're a novice, you go first. Mu Yue didn't use his Byakugan and couldn't read the dice by sound, so he guessed casually, large. All right, I'll bet small, Tsunade replied, and lifted the cup to reveal the dice. She laughed with triumph at first. This felt like a perfect use of her uncanny gambling luck. But as she saw the pips clearly, the smile froze and slowly turned to disbelief. Mu Yue glanced at the dice too, surprised. The total was exactly 16, just short of 17. It was small. Mu Yue had been half prepared to lose. After all, in this village, Tsunade's gambling was like a charity drive. Congratulations. It seems the veteran Lady Tsunade has the upper hand, he said, smiling gently. I actually won? Tsunade muttered, still in shock. From childhood on, she'd never won at cards, dice, or lotteries. Not once. She rubbed her eyes and leaned closer, as if the numbers might shift. They didn't. Impossible, she complained, tugging at her hair. Shizune, who had been washing vegetables nearby, looked over and asked, Lady Tsunade, did you lose again? Tsunade managed, I wish I had. This time I actually won. Shizune hesitated. Given Tsunade's strange history, winning could be more unsettling than losing. In her mind, since Tsunade's wins had sometimes been followed by bad things, a victory felt like another kind of loss. Let's do another round, Tsunade said, steadying herself. The agreement with Mu Yue wouldn't change over a few rounds. Helping Mu Yue develop a ninjutsu wasn't a cruel contract. Once the technique was done, she could go back to taking it easy. Fine by me, Mu Yue replied. He was curious too. Maybe, he wondered, his luck was worse than Tsunade's. Tsunade shook the dice and put them down. I'll go first this time. Large, she said. Mu Yue answered, small, and when Tsunade lifted the cup this time, he let out a quiet, perhaps there is such a thing as beginner's luck. As the dice totaled 10, Mu Yue had won. Tsunade felt a wave of melancholy. If she'd won again, she might have been happier. Instead, she'd won on, see, and then lost. They played another round, and Mu Yue won again. It became clear, Mu Yue's luck was ordinary. Tsunade's was the anomaly. Her first win had simply been a fluke. Well, at least I won once, Tsunade said lightly, but she added, I hope nothing bad comes of it. She'd learned from experience that whenever she unexpectedly won, trouble tended to follow. Mu Yue glanced at her sideways. He'd noticed that in her life, those rare victories did often presage something ominous. Metkai faced a 5-meter boulder. He drew the single-section staff Mu Yue had given him, gripping its shaft with his left hand and the chain with his right. He planted his feet, twisted his torso to the right, and shouted, Dragon-scale legend, blade-severing sword, golden skyline. He formed a hand seal, leapt forward, and in one drawing motion sent his right hand slashing. A thin, golden line flashed through the air. Boom! The boulder split in two and exploded into rubble. After the strike, Metkai's fingers twitched uncontrollably, but he barely noticed the pain. He wore an expression of pure exhilaration. He had finally managed to perform Golden Skyline. He couldn't yet do what Mu Yue could. Mu Yue could use Golden Skyline in a normal state, while Metkai needed the enhancement of the 8 gates to make it work. Still, the power was undeniable. Slicing a stone that size with a single blow was impressive. This taijutsu is incredible, Shiranui Genma exclaimed. For a regular shinobi, Metkai's display was terrifying. Ebisu nodded in agreement. Is this the taijutsu Mu Yue taught you? Teacher Chen asked, walking over to inspect the shattered boulder. From his perspective, the move seemed even more powerful than the Leaf Dragon God technique in terms of concentrated cutting force, though they were different types of attacks. Yes, but it wasn't developed by teacher Mu Yue, Metkai said excitedly, and then told the story of the technique's origin. He found it special and wanted others to know. Taijutsu from before the ninja village era, Milong? Teacher Chen tried to recall, but he had no memory of such a fighter. He wasn't a history expert. Someone from so far back would be beyond his recall. I didn't expect that Mu Yue held back a move like this during our last spar, Teacher Chen said. He wanted to find Mu Yue and ask for another lesson. He'd felt stuck in Taijutsu for a long time, unable to progress, but fighting Mu Yue had reignited his drive. Even small improvements mattered to him, and discovering a new, powerful move inspired him to train again. Teacher Mu Yue seems busy lately. Shall I ask him for you? Metkai offered, scratching his head. Do that, Teacher Chen replied. After training ended, Metkai stopped by Mu Yue's house to ask about another session. The training at the South Border Forest had wrapped up. About a month and a half from now, Mu Yue said after thinking. He was willing to spar, but would be occupied for several weeks. It's almost dinner. Eat first, Mu Yue urged. Metkai brightened at the thought. It'd been a while since he'd had Mu Yue's cooking. Worried his father might delay dinner waiting for him, he ran home at full speed to tell him he'd be late, then sprinted back to Mu Yue's for the meal. After dinner, Metkai didn't go home. He went straight to Kakashi's. He could now open the Gate of Pain, the fourth of the 8 gates in his version, and he could use Golden Skyline. He felt confident he could beat Kakashi. Yo, Kakashi, care for a passionate, youthful match? Metkai shouted, finding Kakashi in an awkward place. Kakashi gave him a black look. Don't you think it's strange to challenge someone here? He said. It was a bathroom. Metkai never considered occasion or atmosphere. After washing up, Kakashi led him to the courtyard to prepare. After long practice, Kakashi had perfected his transparent world, allowing him to control his body and perceive others with uncanny clarity. I've been training hard since the chuunin exams, Metkai declared with a grin. Prepare to taste defeat. Is that so? Kakashi replied coolly. He hadn't been idle either. Repeatedly besting Obito, Metkai, and Shisui had restored his confidence. Against any peer he had faith he could win. The two smiled at each other. Let's start on 3, Metkai said. 3, 2, 1, begin. Rock breathing, full concentration. 8 gates. Gate of life, open. Lightning breathing, full concentration. They both flashed forward. Long training had made Metkai's body immensely powerful. Even with only 3 gates open, his strikes carried tremendous force. Kakashi, though, used lightning release to enhance himself, and then Transparent World to read every motion. With Transparent World, Kakashi saw through Metkai's movements, making it hard for Metkai to land a blow while Kakashi could counter. Metkai found himself at a disadvantage, but his grin only widened. The tougher the opponent, the sweeter the victory would be. My dear friend, I prepared a special technique just for you, and I haven't used it in any other fights. Since Metkai had first opened the Gate of Pain at home, only Mu Yue and Maito Dai knew that secret. 8 gates. Gate of Pain, open, he shouted. End of chapter. 371. Intensified War. Metkai clenched his fist, bellowed, and opened the 4th gate of the 8 gates. If the gates were divided into early, middle, and late stages, the 1st through 3rd were the early stage, the 4th through 6th, the middle, and the 7th and 8th, the late stage. The 1st to 3rd gates were the relatively safe zone. Using them didn't cause lasting physical damage. From the 4th gate onward, though, everything changed. Beyond the 4th, you truly entered the 8-gate state. Speed and strength skyrocketed, but the pressure on the body began to inflict damage. When the Gate of Pain opened, Metkai's chakra surged, and his physical power rose so quickly his body felt pressurized. So he can open the 4th gate normally now, Kakashi thought, his expression tightening as he felt the sudden rush in Guy's aura. Kakashi had not trained the 8 gates himself, but as fellow disciples of Jonin Mutsuki who had sparred often, he understood the basics. Each opened gate boosted speed and strength in varying degrees. He had once defeated Guy when Guy used the 4th gate, but he wasn't naive enough to assume this 4th gate, Guy was the same one from the chuunin exams. Leaf Great Whirlwind. Metkai laughed and launched himself at Kakashi with his signature whirlwind kick. With the 4th gate amplified, his speed and power increased dramatically. Running at full tilt raised a fierce wind that shifted dust and flung pebbles. Fortunately, Kakashi had activated the Transparent World and read the attack, evading before Guy even reached him. Guy's face stayed calm as his first strike missed, and he immediately intensified the assault. He was used to opponents seeing through his moves. The Sharingan of Shisui and Obito had done that. But he had a plan. You can dodge a single attack by seeing it, Guy grinned through the sprint. But what about 30 in a row? Guy forced his opponent into his tempo with blistering, relentless attacks. He traded some raw power for speed, but he was still in the fourth gate, and with the rock-breathing enhancement honed into him, even a toned-down barrage was beyond what a normal shinobi could endure. Boom! Kakashi took a brutal hit and was flung back involuntarily. So much power! Kakashi's eyes widened. He had assumed that prioritizing speed meant sacrificing strength, but this fourth gate guy retained terrifying force while remaining fast. Kakashi was relieved he hadn't tried to meet Guy head-on. He had considered a taijutsu contest when Guy first opened the fourth gate. If he enhanced his body with lightning-release chakra transformation, he might match Guy. After taking one kick to the chest, he abandoned that idea. He'd have to burn a huge amount of chakra to bolster his body, and might still be outmatched by Guy's straightforward, full-force kick. Rock breathing gives the strongest physical boost, and the 8 gates add even more. Together, this makes taijutsu frightening, Kakashi thought. The combination felt like 1 + 1 equaling more than 2. On a life-or-death battlefield, he would stall to conserve strength, maintaining lightning breathing and transparent world drained stamina, while Guy's 8 gates put even more pressure on him. But this was a friendly spar. The process mattered more than the outcome. Kakashi decided to go all out to break the stalemate. He gathered a large amount of chakra and converted it into lightning release. Crackle! Bright yellow lightning danced across his body. Gripping his white fang short sword, Kakashi channeled the lightning down his arm and into the blade. The electric light coated the sword and extended into a lightning blade. His vision narrowed. For the moment, only Might Guy existed in it. This was prepared just for you, Kakashi thought, and Might Guy readied his weapon. Lightning flash! Kakashi charged like a bolt, swinging the lightning blade in a vicious arc. At the same instant, Might Guy sprang forward, the green of his jumpsuit a blur. He held his nunchaku in his left hand, wrapped the hane around his right, planted his feet, and funneled all his strength and chakra into his middle and index fingers. With a drawing motion of his left hand guiding his right, he slashed forward and drew a fine golden line. One launched a blade, one slashed with a finger. Both unleashed their ultimate moves together. The golden filament met the lightning slash with a thunderous crash. The ground erupted beneath the impact. Dust and smoke billowed, hiding their silhouettes. The airflow bent flowers and trees in Kakashi's courtyard as if a sudden gale had swept through. Drops of blood fell to the earth, staining the yellow soil red. Might Guy stared at his bleeding fingers and laughed with admiration. As expected of my best friend, this finger had all my power. It can cut through steel. Kakashi wiped blood from his chest and gave a faint smile. He had lost. Guy's golden skyline had shattered his lightning flash. Guy's finger had taken a severe wound from the clash, but Kakashi had been injured because Guy had timed his retreat perfectly. "Ha-ha! That's what I wanted!" Guy exclaimed, and he wrapped his injured fingers with bandages. He longed for Kakashi to grow even stronger and to challenge him again. Kakashi sighed inwardly. Holding the title of Jonin Mutsuki's strongest disciple was a hard task. The two friends packed up and walked to the Konoha hospital together to receive treatment. Your breathing must be rhythmic. Never let it be chaotic. No matter the situation, keep your breath steady, Mu Yue instructed on the training ground. He continued teaching the darkness breathing technique while Root and Anbu present listened without interrupting. The breathing technique could be partially utilized before mastery. Many of them had already reached over half proficiency and felt the improvements it brought. They all wanted to master this taijutsu quickly. Jonin Mutsuki is generous to share this. This taijutsu belongs in a clan's legacy, Sarutobi Shinji said during a break. Before learning it, when Mu Yue had explained the darkness breathing technique, Shinji thought it would be an A-rank taijutsu. After experiencing its effects firsthand, he felt it was worthy of being a clan's secret technique, something he'd never teach widely if he had created it for himself. He admired Mu Yue for teaching it openly. Just then, the signal for an emergency Jonin assembly sounded. "Let's dismiss for today. Something's happened in the village," Mu Yue said. Today wasn't the scheduled meeting time. This was an urgent summons. Several Anbu followed Mu Yue toward the Hokage building. They were in a non-mission period. Anbu off-duty were equivalent to normal Konoha shinobi. Could something unexpected have happened on the battlefield? Mu Yue wondered. They were at war, and Jonin meetings only called suddenly meant something major. Mu Yue's first thought was trouble on the front lines. The Third Shinobi War hadn't been fully shown in any anime or manga, only scattered events, so Mu Yue couldn't tell if this was a ripple from his interference or something from the original timeline. Could it be because Tsunade beat me at dice yesterday? Mu Yue wondered briefly, remembering his game with her. Jonin Mu Yue, some Jonin greeted him as he entered the meeting room. He smiled and answered them. As he did more and demonstrated stronger ability, he was no longer unknown among the Jonin. Many saw him as a rising star close to Minato Namikaze. Today, we'll get a good chicken for beggar's chicken. It's been weeks since I had any. Tsunade said to Mu Yue the moment she saw him. Should we get some sake? He asked. She liked sake with her drumsticks. No need. I already bought it, Tsunade said proudly, and the banter drew amused looks from the Jonin. Dekai quietly melted back into the crowd. He still recalled Tsunade beating Jiraiya in his youth and respected her temper. Minato simply smiled and joined the conversation. When most of the Jonin had arrived, Hiruzen Sarutobi and other high officials took their seats, and the emergency meet, Inge, began. Hidden Mist of the Land of Water has declared war on Konoha, Hiruzen announced solemnly. He had been shocked when the news arrived. He had opposed Danzo Shimura's plan to demand heavy compensation from the Hidden Mist over the chuunin exams incident, precisely because he feared such provocation would drive the normally secluded Mist to intervene in the Shinobi World War. The Hidden Mist had little reason to pick a fight with Konoha. There were no lingering hostilities, and Konoha was formidable. But now that war had been declared, Hiruzen had only one duty: mobilize defenses to prevent the Mist from wreaking havoc in the Land of Fire. The Hidden Mist joining me means we could have 3 major village enemies, a Jonin said, frowning. It was bad news. On paper, Konoha had scored a few advantages against Iwagakure and Kumogakure, but not decisive damage. If victory were measured on a bar where 100% meant winning, Konoha might only be at 10% against each of those 2. With the Mist entering, Konoha would be forced to divert troops, threatening the gains on other fronts. Even the Hidden Mist has come to meddle, Tsunade, who'd been distracted, turned serious. She understood the implications. 3 powerful villages pressing on Konoha would apply terrible pressure, and Konoha lacked an unmatched expert like her grandfather. Mu Yue felt a touch of concern as well. He wondered if the Mist's move was a reaction to the chuunin exam's fallout, or if Uchiha Madara had secretly influenced events. The timeline of events surrounding Metkai in the Third War was unclear to him. Kakashi's history gave benchmarks. Kakashi was a Jonin by 12, so Mu Yue couldn't tell whether the Mist's declaration was expected or a result of things he had changed. He also considered how the Mist might strike. They were an island nation with a powerful navy, and the east coast of the Land of Fire was the most vulnerable landing point. The south coast was smaller and easier to defend, while reaching it would require a long detour. If the Mist sent their main forces directly to the east coast, it could be a rapid, deep incursion. Mu Yue hoped they wouldn't act too quickly. Metkai wasn't fully developed yet, and if he ran into the 7 ninja swordsmen of the Mist, as in the original tale, it would be a disaster. As the meeting continued, the advisors denounced the Mist's actions. Hiruzen invoked the Will of Fire to rally everyone, and strategies were discussed. Since the Mist hadn't launched a full-scale invasion yet, Konoha's immediate options were limited: heighten vigilance along the southeastern coasts and prepare for possible landings. After the meeting, Danzo Shimura voiced his displeasure. Hiruzen, you should have taken my plan earlier. We could have gained leverage. You're too dictatorial. You should heed my counsel more, Danzo lectured. Hiruzen blew a breath of smoke and regarded Danzo with weary patience. He hadn't expected the Mist to declare war so quickly, but even had he followed Danzo's plan, the Mist might still have sought trouble. And if Hiruzen had truly been dictatorial, Danzo's route would have been disbanded long ago. Route operated like a private Anbu that answered only to Danzo. War is declared already. Talking about past plans won't help, Hiruzen said, removing his pipe and indicating Danzo should speak plainly. At a time like this, Konoha needs root. True, powerful root, Danzo replied in a low voice. Though initially angry that the comparatively low-profile Mist would pick a fight, he quickly saw opportunity. This crisis was perfect for expanding Root's role. Facing such pressure, Hiruzen would find it hard to keep restricting Root. Danzo could argue he was acting for the village's good. Hiruzen considered, then nodded. In this situation, all available forces must be used. Danzo's Root had capabilities valuable in wartime and could contribute. Hiruzen was the Hokage. After the war, he could always curtail Root again if necessary. End of chapter. 3D72, a result that surprised Danzo 3. It's December again, time flies, Kotetsu Hagane sighed. It feels like the holiday special training was only yesterday, and now another long break is coming up. Yeah, the final exam is in 3 weeks. I haven't been studying much lately. I hope I don't mess it up, Izumo Kamizuki said, worry creasing his face. You two, cut it out! Anko Mitarashi scolded as she walked into the classroom. Seeing her two friends pretending to be humble made her roll her eyes. She had fallen for their modesty more than once and ended up crushed by her own low scores. You always say you're not studying, then you get 100 or in the 90s. Who, besides Shisui, can beat you? Anko, you don't understand, Kotetsu said, shaking his head. Once you've scored 100, getting a 95 feels like a step back. Also, after you hit 100, you lose the joy of improving. I hope you never have to feel that pain, Izumo added with a smirk, piling on. Anko's fists tightened. I really envy you two. You have so much room to improve. You've never taken first in theory or practical combat. That was the knife twisting deep. Always being second in practical combat was Anko's constant frustration. Shisui was an immovable mountain in her path. Bang! Bang! Anko used body flicker technique and suddenly appeared beside them, swinging her fists. Kotetsu and Izumo tried to dodge, but they weren't fast enough. After a couple of hits, Anko felt better and smiled. Anko, you're a girl. Don't go around hitting people, Kotetsu warned, rubbing his jaw. We were just speaking the truth. Anko, not won over by words, jabbed again. The two swallowed whatever retort they'd been about to offer. The weather's nice today, Kotetsu said, changing the subject. Yeah, sunshine in December is rare. They both deliberately steered the conversation elsewhere. Then Kotetsu's face lit up with an idea. I wonder who will teach the holiday special training. If it isn't Teacher Mu Yue, I'll refuse. Me too, Anko agreed. If it isn't Mu Yue, I'll spend the whole break having fun instead. Unlikely, Izumo said. Why? Mu Yue hasn't said anything. Anko asked. Because the second semester special training overlaps with the graduates' internships, Izumo explained. Since last year, the school has selected outstanding graduates for internships to get them familiar with ninja work. Last year, Mu Yue was busy with interns and couldn't lead the holiday training. Holiday special training was meant to strengthen graduates. The interns were chosen from that same graduate pool. Kotetsu, ever confident in strength, suggested, why don't we apply to be Mu Yue's interns too? We've beaten 4th graders before. Why shouldn't we be eligible? Strength speaks for itself, he added. If you're strong enough, you can apply for early internships even if you're not a graduate. At that moment, Mu Yue entered the classroom. The three sat up, took out their textbooks, and made eye contact, silent agreement to ask Mu Yue after class. The lesson flew by, and soon the bell rang. See you this afternoon, everyone. Mu Yue's shadow clone smiled and left the room. Hiruzen's side had considered assigning another teacher, but Mu Yue insisted on using a shadow clone. Even without the teaching buff, the clone's knowledge and skill were far above a normal instructor's. Teacher Mu Yue, wait! Anko and the others ran out and caught up with him. We want to become intern ninja. Mu Yue regarded them thoughtfully. Their talents were good, and having trained under him, they were stronger than most 4th graders, especially Anko, who could already rank well in the 4th grade practical exam. I'll add your names to the list. Results will be announced at the end of the semester, Mu Yue said. Yay! Teacher Mu Yue is the best. Anko cheered. Kotetsu and Izumo grinned too. Intern ninja as second years, practically making history. On the secluded training ground, Root and Anbu stood at attention. Everyone was tense. Today was the final eye of training and the exam. With Hiruzen Sarutobi and Danzo Shimura watching nearby, the fighters wanted to show their best. Sarutobi Shinji versus Shimon Kadoe, Mu Yue announced, scanning his list. A fight was the clearest measure of a ninja's skill. Mu Yue did not limit the contest to a ring. Sarutobi Shinji stepped forward, Shimon Kadoe followed. They formed the confrontation seal and stared each other down. "Start!" Mu Yue called. Both burst with chakra and surged forward, using repeated bursts of shunpo to accelerate. Hiruzen watched with a smile. They're lucky to have a teacher like Mu Yue. Shunpo is an excellent body flicker technique. Danzo's reply was abrupt. The ninjas trained by my route are naturally excellent. Hiruzen shot back without changing expression. Danzo, have you forgotten? There's never been a root ninja named Hayate Mugetsu. He was warning Danzo not to claim Mu Yue. Mu Yue had been erased from root records by Hiruzen after leaving. Mu Yue watched them, a little conflicted, as though he'd been caught between two loyalties. Hiruzen, inwardly, thought that had he found Mu Yue sooner, things might have been different. Mu Yue's time en route must have left a mark. Shunpo and concentrated chakra gave Sarutobi Shinji the edge. He struck Shimon back several meters with a punch and pressed the advantage. Shimon responded by activating the darkness breathing technique, total concentration breathing, channeling chakra to boost his body and blunt Shinji's attack. Shinji activated it as well. The match evened out, but Shinji's superior application of shunpo and chakra let him finish the fight in 4 minutes. Watching, Hiruzen mused, has Shinji got a talent for darkness breathing? His improvement in just 2.5 months is unusual. Danzo was equally surprised. Shimon Kadoe, one of his recent additions, lasted only 4 minutes, whereas before he might have lasted half that. Mu Yue called the next pair. Feitian Shinji versus Sanlun Liangtai. Both Hiruzen and Danzo leaned forward. If these two techniques, Shunpo and the darkness breathing technique, were responsible, the change wasn't an anomaly. It could be systemic. The fighters streaked through the forest in a blur. Under the breathing technique's enhancement, they felled trees, and Sanlun Liangtai collapsed only when he was completely spent. Match after match showed the same pattern, dramatic gains across the board. Those of greater talent, Feitian Shinji, Sarutobi Shinji, improved the most, but every trainee had clearly advanced in strength. Hiruzen realized he had underestimated the darkness breathing technique. Although it's ranked A in difficulty, its practical effect is far beyond ordinary A-ranked taijutsu, he said. The combination with Shunpo and Mu Yue's teaching made for exceptional results. Danzo felt a prick of regret. Had he not sent Mu Yue away to the Ninja Academy, training Root alone might have lifted Root's power tremendously. Hiruzen praised Mu Yue openly. You've given me a surprise, such improvement in less than 3 months. You flatter me, Lord Third Hokage. They trained seriously. This improvement is deserved, Mu Yue answered humbly. Hiruzen, noting Mu Yue's talent for developing jutsu, offered help. I have some experience in jutsu development from the second Hokage. If you're interested, I can direct some help your way. Mu Yue brightened and thanked him. Danzo watched from the side, displeased. He had already lost the right to recruit Mu Yue openly. Still, he told himself that no matter what Hiruzen gained now, Mu Yue's heart would always belong to Root. 373. Do not set the flag before going on a mission. Obito, can you tell me about your time as an intern ninja? Shisui asked during a break in training. He'd already talked with Mu Yue about graduating early and taking part in the internship, and wanted some first-hand experience. He'd meant to ask Kakashi. He figured Kakashi would be more reliable, but Kakashi hadn't come to the south border forest today. Since Minato's return, Obito and the others had been shuttling between Minato's training and Mu Yue's, sometimes a few days with one, then back to the other. Shisui, why are you asking? You're only in your 2nd year, aren't you? Obito scratched his head and looked puzzled. I'm planning to graduate early this year and take the internship, Shisui explained. Oh. Understanding dawned on Obito. He had no objection to Shisui graduating ahead of schedule. Kakashi had graduated early too, and Shisui could more than hold his own. Then you came to the right person. I was one of the most outstanding interns. Obito puffed out his chest and lifted his chin, proud. Their team finished the most missions in both number and quality, though he hedged with one of, since Metkai was on that team too. Very impressive, Shisui said, clapping. His praise was polite more than enthusiastic, but he knew Obito would take it well. The triumphant expression returned to Obito's face at once. First thing, an intern is still a ninja. You take on assigned missions, and accidents can happen. Be careful and cautious out there, Obito began. Shisui nodded. Obito wasn't as flaky as he'd expected. Even if something goes wrong, don't panic. As long as you and your teammates keep trying, you'll pull through, Obito added, clenching a fist for emphasis. He and Guy and Kakashi had refused to give up against the Raikage candidate, and Mu Yue's guidance had kept them alive against the Kumogakure Jonin. Were there many accidents during your internship? Shisui asked, curious. Obito sounded like he wasn't exaggerating. No accidents on D-rank missions, Obito said after a moment, but C-rank missions, those had problems. We ran into a Raikage candidate, faced 1,000 enemy ninja attacking, stuff like that. The internship is that dangerous? Shisui almost thought he'd misheard. Encounters with a Raikage candidate or 1,000 enemy ninja sounded like S-rank problems, not C-rank. Of course it's dangerous. If it weren't for Mu Yue sensei, we'd have died on some of those, Obito said as if it were obvious. But no other intern teams had casualties. Something didn't sit right with Shisui. Obito wasn't lying, but the details felt off. Maybe other teams only did D-rank stuff. Our team was specially authorized by the Hokage to take C-rank missions, Obito mused, remembering that other teams couldn't take C-ranks. Shisui nodded. He decided he'd ask Kakashi about the inconsistencies another day. Oh, one more thing, Obito added, suddenly serious. Before a mission, never say, "This mission will have no accidents." If you say that, an accident's bound to happen. Shisui blinked. Why would? Because Kakashi always says that, Obito said gravely. The more he guarantees no accidents, the bigger they get. Obito pointed an accusing finger, as if naming the single cause of misfortune. Shisui found the notion odd, but seeing Obito's solemn expression, he made a mental note of the warning. After a long day of training, Shisui went home exhausted. He rested briefly, then started to prepare dinner when someone knocked at the door. When he opened it, his face broke into a surprised smile. Uncle Shinhiro, he greeted. Standing there was his biological uncle, Uchiha Shinhiro, someone Shisui hadn't seen in a long time. The war had kept Shinhiro busier than before. Sometimes he was gone from the village for months at a stretch. Shisui, long time no see. You've gotten taller, Shinhiro said with a chuckle, gesturing to show how much he'd grown. Please come in, uncle. I'll pour you some tea, Shisui offered, stepping aside. Shinhiro nodded, and set the fruits and sweets he'd brought on the table. Have you eaten yet? He asked, taking the cup Shisui offered. The house didn't look like they'd already eaten. Not yet. I was about to make dinner, Shisui answered. Perfect. I haven't either. Let me treat you tonight, nephew. Shinhiro laughed as he headed for the kitchen. Whether he'd actually eaten or not, he insisted on taking care of Shisui while he was here. Shisui didn't refuse and followed to help. Over the meal, Shinhiro asked with a concerned tone, How's your training? Any problems lately? Shisui found himself remembering the childhood care Shinhiro had given. Very good, no problems, he said. He had the family's inheritance to keep him secure and Mu Yue to guide his training. Mu Yue handled everything, practical needs, and even celebrating Shisui's birthday, so there really weren't any difficulties. You're so mature, I feel useless as your uncle. You're a real Uchiha talent. Shinhiro said, smiling. Uncle, I have something to tell you, Shisui said, then told him about his plan to graduate early and become a ninja. Graduate early, huh? Shinhiro fell silent, thinking. If you aren't learning anything at the academy, there's no point staying. He knew Shisui's talent. Judging by what he'd seen, Shinhiro believed Shisui could become the next Uchiha Kagami, or even surpass him. Being a ninja came with danger, but it also accelerated growth. Shisui's maturity, Shinhiro thought, reflected careful consideration. Reassured by his uncle's approval, Shisui smiled. Shinhiro's support mattered. He was the second person Shisui trusted. After dinner, Shinhiro suggested a sparring match to help with digestion, and perhaps to reassure himself about Shisui's readiness. Shisui agreed. Shinhiro hadn't had time to guide his training lately, so he didn't know how strong Shisui had become. To avoid damaging the house, Shisui led him to a nearby deserted clearing. Come at me with everything you've got, Shinhiro said, standing opposite. Full concentration, flame breathing. Shisui focused his breathing to the extreme, sharpening his physical ability and chakra nature transformation. Fire release, great fireball barrage. Shisui condensed chakra in his throat and exhaled 2 huge fireballs in rapid succession, blasting them toward his uncle. Knowing Shinhiro was a powerful Uchiha Jonin, Shisui held nothing back. Is that an evolution of the great fireball technique? Shinhiro murmured, surprised. It was impressive for a chuunin Uchiha to produce 1 such fireball. 2 in a single breath was exceptional. He moved quickly to avoid being hit. He knew the technique well and wouldn't be caught by the flames. Chakra flared in Shisui's legs and he charged with tremendous speed. Shinhiro met his punch with an open palm, but still staggered back a step under the force. Have I been away 4 years? Are you already 11? Shinhiro joked, taken aback by the speed and power he'd felt. No, I'm still 7, Shisui replied with a smile and backed away to create distance. Fire Dragon Flame Bullet! Shisui formed his seals rapidly, gathering most of his chakra and transforming it into a torrent of flame that he spewed forward in a single breath. As a fellow flame-breathing practitioner, and with Shisui's higher ninjutsu aptitude, Mu Yue had taught him this powerful technique. Shinhiro's eyes widened at the sheets of high-temperature fire rushing toward him. This is a 7-year-old? For a moment, the older Uchiha let himself entertain an impossible thought. If everything went right, could Shisui overtake Uchiha Kagami? Could he, in some distant future, rival the heights of Madara? It lasted only a second. Madara and Hashirama were legends whose level ordinary shinobi could not truly approach. Shinhiro used fire release to cancel Shisui's dragon flame bullet and watched the boy with a grin full of pride. With Shisui's strength, his self-preservation and combat foundations were more than solid. Whether he became a genin or a chuunin, he'd be a force to be reckoned. Edwith, Chapter 374, Konoha's Predicament. Anbu training had wrapped up, and with it the 2nd semester of the ninja school. Graduation internships and the holiday training schedule were all settled. Of course the holiday special training for this semester isn't with Mu Yue sensei again, one student groaned. It'll be a long time before we see Mu Yue sensei, another sighed. Class 1 of the 2nd grade erupted in complaints. Apart from the graduates, only a handful of students from other grades could take part in the holiday special training. Most of those 2nd graders were from this very class. Having grown used to Mu Yue's lessons, they found other teachers' classes dull and hard to learn from. The prospect of a holiday without Mu Yue felt like punishment. Forget it, I'll just rest and train hard next year, one student decided, and several nearby nodded in agreement. Hey, how come Anko and Kotetsu aren't on the list? Someone else noticed. Anko, Kotetsu Hagane, and a few others were missing from the roster of 2nd graders selected for the holiday program. That's weird, the students around him murmured. Sure, Anko and Kotetsu could be a comic pair, but they were legitimately strong. Anko in particular ranked right behind Shisui in ability among the 2nd years. It's only holiday special training after all, Kotetsu said with mock gravity as he stepped forward, enjoying the attention. Truly exceptional students go to more secretive places. Izumo Kamizuki chimed in. Isn't it just an internship? You're making it sound like you're going somewhere amazing. Anko couldn't resist cutting in. Besides, neither of you got assigned to Mu Yue sensei. She smiled smugly. Izumo hadn't expected her to be that petty. She'd interrupted his posturing just to brag. Kotetsu was visibly annoyed. He'd been unlucky this time, but his brother's good fortune stung even more. Seeing his 2 friends fume with envy gave Anko a small thrill. Shisui, do you know who our other teammate is? My notice only said you, Anko asked. It's Shizune, Shisui replied. Mu Yue had told him directly. Internships were usually 3-person teams. Mu Yue wasn't going to give Shisui special treatment, and the more people he interacted with, the better it would be for him. After considering the options, Mu Yue had chosen Anko and Shizune to join him. Keeping Shizune close for 6 months would help her grow. Shizune had already graduated and had no squad, so adding her wasn't a problem. After all, Hiruzen had once done something similar for Kakashi. As for Anko, she was simply more suitable than the other 4th years and was familiar with Shisui. Mu Yue saw no reason not to pick her. Shizune-senpai? Didn't she already graduate? Anko scratched her head, piecing together a few scattered memories. She and Shizune had only barely crossed paths before. Normally, she wouldn't be eligible to join an internship either, Shisui reminded her. Their team was full of exceptions. Heh, can't wait for the ninja life ahead. Anko immediately brushed the rest off and started picturing her wonderful internship. Seeing her excitement, Shisui swallowed the words he'd been about to say. There were still a few days before the internship began. No need to ruin Anko's mood yet. The truth was harsh. Ordinary intern ninja only took D-rank cores with no real combat. Intern life for newly graduated genin usually meant boring chores and training, not the adventurous missions Anko was imagining. Meanwhile, in the mission office, Minato Namikaze scanned several mission scrolls and settled on a relatively difficult A rank. Search for and eliminate the defeated Awagakure ninja in the southwest of the grass country. Through combat training, Minato understood his three disciples' strengths. If the enemies were careless, the three could possibly take down a very strong jonin. Even if the foes weren't careless, he estimated Kakashi and his team could handle 2 ordinary jonin. But beyond that, it would be risky. Obito and Kakashi, while formidable as frontline fighters, couldn't sustain full-power assaults for long. Kakashi's lightning-fast strikes and Obito's chakra-enhanced fire abilities both burned through chakra quickly. Their reserves wouldn't support prolonged all-out fighting. Still, A-rank missions rarely required prolonged battles against numerous jonin. Understood, Jonin Minato, the registration ninja said, and the mission was registered. Minato then handed the mission details to his 3 disciples. It's an A-rank war mission, and the reward is huge, Obito exclaimed when he saw the 700,000 Ryo commission. With D-rank missions usually paying only around 5,000 Ryo, Obito had no trouble imagining how much this job was worth. That means the enemy's strength won't be simple, Kakashi warned. Aside from rare exceptions, mission pay generally reflected difficulty, war commissions especially. Kakashi's right. Don't be careless, Obito, Rin added. After training with Tsunade, her medical ninjutsu had improved noticeably. She still worried about them getting hurt. Even the best treatment couldn't undo the initial pain of an injury. Minato-sensei took this mission, so he must think we can handle it, Obito said with a grin, glancing at Minato. Right, Minato-sensei? Minato smiled and nodded. You're all outstanding, Konoha ninja. There won't be a problem. If something unexpected happens, I'm here. Hidden Mist had already declared war on Konoha. No attack had been launched yet, but the declaration had put great pressure on the village. Minato's decision to accept a high-difficulty A-rank mission was partly to train his students and partly to ease Konoha's burden. The most direct way to relieve pressure was to strike at one of the great ninja villages hard enough that they wouldn't dare move against Konoha again, an extremely difficult goal. But every action that could distract an enemy helped. It's comforting to be on a mission with you, Minato-sensei, Obito said, giving Minato a thumbs up. With Flying Thunder God, Minato was simply uncatchable, perfect for both striking enemies and rescuing teammates. In Obito's book, Minato ranked right behind the incomparable Mu Yue, which was as close to first place as anyone could get. Kakashi agreed silently. Their previous skirmish with a Raikage candidate had proven that. With the mission accepted, Minato and his 3 disciples set out for the grass country. The hardest part wouldn't be defeating the enemies, it would be locating them. The southwest of the grass country was vast. Far away, White Zetsu, observing the field, quickly relayed the movement. Lord Madara, Uchiha Obito has gone to the grass country on a mission. Black Zetsu passed the intelligence to Uchiha Madara. Madara's eyes flickered as he considered the developments. Then he shook his head minutely. If it were only Obito and Kakashi, Madara might immediately put his plan into motion to show that Uchiha Jr. the darkness of the shinobi world, but Minato's presence made that dangerous. Minato was powerful, and the Flying Thunder God technique would easily disrupt any scheme. Madara would not act unless he had enough power to contain Minato. Lord Madara, this is getting tricky, Black Zetsu warned. Every time Obito goes on a mission, he's accompanied by either Hayate Mugetsu or Minato Namikaze. That really affects your plan. Black Zetsu fretted that Madara, getting older, might not have the time, and a botched move would be costly to repair. Madara smiled confidently. Unfavorable? On the contrary, things are turning in our favor. Once Hidden Mist officially goes to war with Konoha, the Shinobi world will erupt into chaos. How then can Minato Namikaze and Hayate Mugetsu stop my plan? Madara had plotted carefully and believed his plan nearly flawless. He had contingencies for Obito failing. Shisui was first among them. From the intelligence, Madara judged Shisui's talent rivaled that of his brother Izuna. Shisui's family situation, his closest relative, was often away on missions, made him an easier target for Madara's blackening plan. Were it not for Shisui's Yush's personality, he might even have been a higher priority than Obito. Obito's temperament had been a major contributing factor in Madara's calculations. Black Zetsu grinned in admiration. Lord Madara's insight is profound. 305. Battlefield Exercise. How unlucky. The Yellow Flash. The Iwagakure shinobi who had been flanking the supply convoy froze when Minato Namikaze and his team appeared. Any hope of escape vanished. Minato's speed was legendary among the Iwagakure from the grass country skirmishes. Only Jiraiya was mentioned in the same breath. Now, after holding the new AB combo from Kumogakure to a standstill on the Land of Hot Water battlefield, Minato's name carried even more weight. Escaping him seemed impossible. Don't be cocky. Minato-sensei won't even have to move to finish you. Obito and Kakashi exchanged a look and stepped forward, taking a defensive formation to protect Rin behind them as they approached the 5 Iwagakure. Minato flung out several Flying Thunder God kunai to seal off any escape routes. He wouldn't take the lead in this fight. He intended to support Obito's team. From the chakra signatures Minato had already read, only one of the 5 seemed like a jonin. The rest were chuunin or genin. This was something Obito and the others could handle. The Iwagakure special jonin's lips curled with grim hope when he saw Minato standing back. If he couldn't defeat Minato, he could certainly subdue 3 kids who looked barely 10. If you intend to use us as sharpening stones, be ready for the blade to break, he thought fiercely. He'd brought 3 chuunin and a genin with him. That was enough to encircle and kill a jonin. He refused to believe those 3 youngsters were anything special. Still, the jonin didn't let his guard drop. He knew Minato wouldn't just stand by if his comrades were in danger. If they could hold just one enemy hostage, they might be able to retreat, or at least kill a Konoha shinobi. Earth Release, Rock Iron Cannon Technique, the jonin barked. 4 Iwagakure formed chakra and spat jagged rocks toward Kakashi and Obito. Flame breathing, full concentration, Obito hissed. Lightning breathing, full concentration, Kakashi answered. Obito gathered chakra in his throat, shaped it into fire release chakra, and exhaled in one long, fierce breath. 2 massive, orange-red fireballs formed and barreled toward the 5 Iwagakure, swallowing the rocks hurled at them. A genius, the Iwagakure jonin muttered, eyes fixed on Obito. They didn't want to take that fireball head-on and scattered to avoid it. Flash, double strike, Kakashi moved. With chakra erupting in his legs, Kakashi's body blurred into lightning. 2 streaks of movement flashed through the air, and, in a heartbeat, 2 of the Iwagakure chuunin fell under his blade. The jonin's eyes widened. The speed of that blade left no time to dodge. Suddenly, Minato's restraint made sense. These 3 weren't ordinary kids. Water Release, Water Dragon Bullet Technique. Rin called as the enemies scrambled. While the others were avoiding Obito's fire, Rin formed hand signs and spat out a water dragon. Just when the Iwagakure thought they'd evaded it, Rin changed the form, converting the dragon into a thick torrent that drenched them. It was a variant Meiterumi had demonstrated during the chuunin exams. Mu Yue had studied and taught it to Rin. The technique demanded fine chakra shaping, so Rin could only use it while in full water-breathing focus. Lightning Release, Purple Lightning. Kakashi's hand crackled as he condensed chakra into a dazzling purple current, then unleashed it in a wide arc that engulfed the soaked Iwagakure. Only the special jonin managed to cling to consciousness. The other 2 were knocked out by the electricity. Fire Release, Phoenix Sage Flower Claw Crimson. Seeing the jonin's movements slowed by paralysis, Obito unleashed a B-rank fire release, a volley of fiery shuriken that detonated on impact. When the smoke cleared, there were no standing Iwagakure on the field. Good work. Both teamwork and individual performance were excellent. Minato praised them with a small smile. He had worried Obito might go all out and burn unnecessary chakra, but Obito had used restraint. Minato preferred conserving their reserves. They were still in a war zone. Obito chuckled. It is only an A-rank mission. The enemies weren't that strong. If you were alone, you'd find out how strong they really are, Kakashi said coolly. Kakashi, what do you mean if I were alone? We're a team, Obito snapped. Enough arguing. Kakashi's just worried you'll get careless, Obito, Rin said, trying to mediate. I'm worried he'll make a mistake that costs the whole squad, Kakashi added. I wouldn't, Obito began, but Minato cut him off. Mission's done. Let's head to the camp and rest, Minato said gently. He knew Kakashi and Obito often bickered. It was part of their dynamic. They'd already burned energy searching. They needed to rest and conserve chakra. Camp? Aren't we going back to Konoha? Obito asked, puzzled. In wartime, Jiraiya, as unit commander, can assign missions. We can stay here and do more operations, Minato explained. He wanted to ease Konoha's burden, so he wouldn't return after a single mission. He'd stay and take on tasks that weren't overly dangerous, to keep pressure off the village. Oh, that's convenient, Obito said, pleased. The travel time alone for returning and heading out again would waste resources. The three accompanied Minato back to Konoha's camp in the grass country. Haha, Minato, now I can relax a lot. Jiraiya grinned when he learned Minato had arrived. Minato was invaluable on the battlefield. He cut down low to mid-level enemies with ease, took on powerhouse opponents like the AB combo, and supported teams against Jinchuriki. Toad Uncle, I'm here too. Any tough A-rank missions? I'll take them all. Obito announced like a mission addict. Kakashi's here too. He might become a famous genius on the battlefield, Jiraiya said, eyeing Kakashi with a nod and a smile. Obito's brow twitched. Sure, Jiraiya was teasing. And Rin, medical Nin is crucial on the battlefield. You're a great help, Jiraiya added, and gave Rin a thumbs up. Damn it, Toad Uncle, I'm right here. Can't you see me? Obito protested when Jiraiya complimented everyone but him. Goggles, brat, show some respect. Call me Toad Sage or Jiraiya-sama, Jiraiya replied, thwacking Obito on the head. Otherwise, forget A-rank missions. I'll have you doing D-rank missions every day. All right, Jiraiya Uncle, Obito muttered, reluctantly changing how he addressed him. Calling him a sage was out of the question. In Obito's mind, there were only two true sages, Mu Yue and the Sage of Six Paths. You brat, Jiraiya laughed. Minato smiled and stepped in. Don't tease him more. Let's go over the current situation. Jiraiya was easygoing, his teasing was harmless, and Minato knew that well. Monday morning, Anko arrived at the training ground Mu Yue had mentioned. She thought she was early, but Mu Yue and Shisui were already there. She was the last to show. Mu Yue-sensei, good morning, Anko greeted cheerfully. You're all early. I even got here 3 minutes ahead. Everyone knows each other, so we'll skip introductions and start training, Mu Yue said. The three students nodded. Mu Yue pulled 3 bells from his pouch. Simple exercise. Take a bell from me. Whoever gets a bell will be taught a powerful ninjutsu or taijutsu. This wasn't Mu Yue's old trick of grab the bell and you pass. The traditional bell exercise trained cooperation, but with the starker differences in strength between Shisui, Anko, and the others, forced teamwork would be counterproductive. So Mu Yue changed the stakes. Getting a bell earned you a reward. It wasn't about teamwork this time, but testing individual strength and sparking motivation. How strong is powerful? Anko asked, curious. Lightning release, false darkness. Mu Yue formed hand seals and exhaled a spear of lightning that sliced through a small stand of trees. The crash of falling wood echoed. Tempest kick! He gathered chakra in his foot and struck, sending slashes through stone. That's roughly the level, Mu Yue said with a gentle smile as he withdrew his foot. He wasn't short on powerful techniques, some just couldn't be taught yet. Wow, I want to learn that, Anko said, eyes shining. This was much flashier than small fireballs. If she showed Kotetsu Hagane and Izumo Kamizuki, they'd be envious. If you want to learn, then grab a bell. Get one, and I'll teach you, Mu Yue said, hanging the bells at his waist. Anko's gaze darted to 2 bags of dango lying behind Mu Yue. Mu Yue-sensei, those dango are nobodies. Can I have them? She called, then lunged for the bells. Bang! Mu Yue tapped the top of her head with 2 fingers and sent her flying a few meters. Frustrated, Anko landed and scowled. She'd tried to tempt him and failed. Dango left on the ground usually means it's spoiled, right? Shizune murmured dryly. She was quiet, but Anko's antics were too obvious to ignore. Maybe someone just forgot them, Anko shot back. Flame breathing, full concentration, Shisui said and spat 2 giant fireballs at Mu Yue. He knew Anko's limits. She only had the 3-body technique and a D-rank fireball, and he'd had to beat her in every practical exam. Shizune was a healer. Her skills were focused on support. Shisui could handle both of them easily, which made a team approach pointless for this drill. Water release, water dragon bullet technique, Mu Yue responded, summoning a massive water dragon that swallowed the fireballs and surged at Shisui. Shisui flicked his eyes and activated the Sharingan. His vision sharpened to a bloody red. Mu Yue's torrent was substantial, not something to block casually. Shisui could have fought fire with fire, but that would waste chakra. Dodging was more efficient. He slipped aside as the water dragon rushed past. Mu Yue concentrated his breathing, detonated a burst of chakra, and appeared in front of Shisui with lightning speed, pointing a finger. Bang! Shisui was blown backward at high speed and collapsed near Anko and Shizune. Anko breathed out a long sigh of relief. If even Shisui, the one who always beat her, fell so quickly, the training's difficulty was clearly the cause. It wasn't that she was too weak. Mu Yue's test was that demanding. So fast, I can't even react. Shisui picked himself up and thought quickly. He wasn't surprised. After all, it was Mu Yue. Even now, Mu Yue was holding back. If he unleashed his full speed, Shisui wasn't sure he'd even be able to see him clearly. In that case, I have to keep moving fast for a long time. He didn't give up. He couldn't hope to truly defeat Mu Yue, but he only needed to finish the training exercise. Mu Yue would inevitably relax a bit and leave an opening. Otherwise, none of them could get near him under rock-breathing full concentration combined with transparent world. If they seized that chance, the training could be completed. Mu Yue, who had sent Shisui flying, did not pursue. He smiled and addressed Shizune. Why don't you give it a try? Even if it's not for the reward, you'll get some real combat experience. Shizune hesitated only a moment, then stepped forward. Her teammates had already been beaten back. It would look strange if she didn't at least try. She approached using basic breathing and took a taijutsu stance. She knew she couldn't snatch the bell. Shisui, far stronger than she was, had barely gotten close. But she wouldn't slack off just because the odds were against her. Mu Yue reached for the fist she fainted with, but the left hook was a diversion. Chakra surged into her leg and she launched a spinning whirlwind kick. Mu Yue regarded it as too slow. He blocked the whirlwind with his right hand and with a backhand sent Shizune flying. Fire release, Phoenix Sage Flower Claw Crimson. Shisui roared as he recovered. He gathered chakra and exhaled, sending a torrent of flames and a barrage of flaming shuriken toward Mu Yue. The technique was much faster than the ordinary Great Fireball. Mu Yue dodged with respect rather than meeting it head-on. The flaming shuriken struck the ground and caused a string of explosions, scorching the training field. Anko watched the damage and felt small. Shisui's Phoenix Sage Flower Claw Crimson was overwhelming. She could feel the gap between them. She wondered how someone with the same eyes, ears, and nose could be so different. Then she noticed something. Shisui's eyes could turn red. Phantom body flicker technique, Shisui cried. He formed hand signs, and suddenly more than 20 images of himself raced around Mu Yue at high speed. Mu Yue didn't use Byakugan or Transparent World. He simply waited. A figure rushed in from the front. Mu Yue slashed at the air. An energy surge hit the attacker, and it flickered out like a phantom. Mu Yue had expected a front assault. Someone would use a decoy to draw attention. As predicted, a figure flashed from Mu Yue's left and lunged for his waist. Mu Yue's right hand erupted with dazzling purple electricity and split into currents that shredded the attacker into nothing. The electrical spread wiped out several nearby phantoms too. A Shisui on the right then lunged. Mu Yue swept his right hand, and that image dissolved into smoke. It was a shadow clone. Just as Mu Yue anticipated, the clones were being used as distractions. Shisui's main body, which had been constantly moving, showed a flash of intent in his eyes. He let the remaining phantoms and the clone carry out the diversion, while his true body gathered chakra, preparing to snatch the bell at top speed while Mu Yue was momentarily unprepared. Anko watched the spectacle giddily. This is so exciting. I should get some dango, she thought. Just as Shisui's finger came within 3 centimeters of the bell, Mu Yue reappeared at his side and sent him flying. "If you'd been just a bit faster, you might have done it," Mu Yue said with a gentle smile. The gap was too wide. No amount of effort could bridge it without a breakthrough. It was like trying to buy a house. If you earned over 10,000 a month, there was some hope. With 4 or 5,000, it was impossible. Anko puffed out her chest and strode toward Mu Yue. "Since I can't trick you, I'll show you my true power," she declared. Shizune exchanged a puzzled look with her. If someone as strong as Shisui failed, where did Anko's confidence come from? Had she been hiding strength? The power of this jutsu is terrifying. Even a strong teacher like you might not withstand it. "Teacher Mu Yue, come closer and feel it," Anko said brazenly as she neared. Mu Yue smiled and let her come. He knew Anko. He wasn't going to be fooled. Anko went into hand signs. Enemy confusion technique, smoke puffs, and several adult versions of Anko in fishnet appeared. Anko, hoping the illusion would work on a male ninja, thought, "If this succeeds, I'll treat everyone to dango." She'd seen her brothers use this jutsu to great effect on men. Faster than Anko's hand could reach the bell, Mu Yue's fingers tapped her forehead, 2 fingers together, a light but firm press. "This isn't terrifying," he said. Anko staggered back 2 steps, the distance between her and the bell restored. "Damn it, it didn't work. After I catch them, I'll give them 2 punches," she muttered, abandoning the dango plan. Shizune was speechless. Anko, cute as she seemed, was maddeningly hard to read, brave and shameless, full of flaws, but resolute. Shisui, however, was not surprised. He trained in the South Border Forest and routinely sent a shadow clone to school that returned memories afterward. He'd been classmates with Anko for 2 years and knew her tendencies well. Bold and unconcerned with others' judgment, that was Anko. After a short rest, Shisui began another attempt. Shizune and Anko, lacking the strength for direct challenge, tried every trick they could think of to create openings, but whether working alone or cooperating to help Shisui, they never managed to take the bell from Mu Yue's waist. The sun slid to the west. The day faded. Nobody completed the training before evening. "Everyone, you've worked hard. That's all for today. Tomorrow, I'll take you on a mission," Mu Yue announced. He hadn't been surprised by the result. Shisui's goal in taking the internship was to graduate early and grow stronger. Mu Yue planned to press him from the start. The bell-snatching challenge was designed to force a breakthrough. He would repeat it only occasionally, not daily. If he did it every day, Shisui couldn't reasonably be expected to break through that often. The next morning, the 4 of them gathered at the training ground before heading to the Hokage building. "Teacher Mu Yue, what kind of mission is this going to be? We're not fighting enemy ninjas already, are we? Maybe we could start on some bandits?" Anko asked nervously. "Don't worry, I won't put you up against enemy ninjas right away," Mu Yue replied with a faint smile. At the mission desk, Anko's face fell. The board was full of D-rank requests, moving supplies, picking up trash. "Is that really what ninjas do?" she complained. "It's for the safety of intern and newly graduated ninjas," the registration ninja explained. Anko relaxed when she saw the pay, about 5,000 Ryo a mission. Mu Yue and the team spent the day clearing D-rank missions. He wanted them to demonstrate competence before requesting special privileges. Over the next week, Mu Yue alternated missions and training. Missions on Tuesday, training on Wednesday, missions again on Thursday. Apart from the first-day bell exercise, the rest of the training was conventional, ninjutsu and taijutsu under Mu Yue's instruction. He planned to stage the bell exercise roughly once every 3 weeks to keep the pressure on without burning everyone out. During that time, Mu Yue taught Asuma the wind breathing he'd recently completed. Asuma, who had practiced basic breathing for months, picked it up quickly. He reminded Mu Yue of how fast Rin Nohara had learned water breathing. Wind breathing reshaped Asuma's view of ninja techniques. It enhanced wind nature transformation, amplified wind release, and at a certain level could let one enter wind-breathing chakra mode and cast windjutsu without hand signs. "I knew it, Teacher Mu Yue. You're the most talented ninja. The old man is called the Professor of Ninjutsu, but how could his techniques compare to wind breathing?" Asuma gushed. Mu Yue shook his head. "The 3rd Hokage's strengths differ from mine. He's better at combination ninjutsu." He had also told Asuma plainly before teaching him that wind breathing was a secret he'd worked long and hard to develop, and that Asuma should ask before passing it on. Asuma had no objections. The technique was simply that good. Meanwhile, Obito's life mission progress jumped again. Combining his and Kakashi's recent mission rewards and the Flying Thunder God coordinates that had gone quiet for a while, Mu Yue guessed Minato was taking Obito and the others on battlefield missions, and Obito had performed well. Battlefield work was the fastest way to build strength, merit, and prestige, the three things needed to become Hokage. If this continued, Mu Yue estimated Obito's life mission could reach 20% in about 4 months. By the second week, with Mu Yue's squad clearing D-rank missions rapidly, Hiruzen Sarutobi granted them permission to handle C-rank missions early. "Excellent squads like yours can take on greater responsibilities," he said benevolently, though it was also practical. If Mu Yue's team kept sweeping up D-rank jobs, other intern squads would be left. "Yay! No more chores! Hokage-sama, you're so wise!" Anko squealed, giving Hiruzen a thumbs up. Shisui allowed himself a faint smile. Constantly doing D-rank chores wouldn't make them grow like Metkai and the others. They needed to leave the village for real challenges. After thanking the Hokage, Mu Yue began choosing missions. Picking a mission was a skill. It had to be likely to include unexpected events, but not so dangerous they couldn't handle it. It had to be near the war front, but not in the middle of it, and the battlefield chosen couldn't be crawling with high-level enemies. Northern Land of Rivers. Mu Yue scanned the board and found a promising bandit subjugation mission. "Let's take the Land of Rivers mission," Mu Yue said to the registration ninja as he picked up the scroll. There was a chance of encountering Cloud or Sand Ninja in the Land of Rivers, but no one there was strong enough that Mu Yue couldn't handle them. Even if they ran into the strongest opponent on that battlefield, he could still lead Shisui and the others to a safe retreat. High safety, with opportunities to train his pupils. That was Mu Yue's standard for choosing assignments. Of course, it was still only a C-rank mission. Most of the time, they wouldn't meet any real enemy. After registering, Mu Yue showed the mission scroll to his students. "Target, Land of Rivers. Let's go." Anko, who had never left Konoha, brightened at once. With the Hokage's special permission for a C-rank mission, she had already planned how to brag to her brothers when she returned. "How did you know I just got back from a C-rank mission?" and then reveal the Hokage's special allowance. "Anko, don't rush. We still have to take the client with us," Shizune reminded her. She might not be exactly like the others, but she was a trained ninja and knew protocol. "Oh, right. The client." Anko's steps, already aimed toward the village gate, stopped immediately. "Don't be reckless on a mission." Mu Yue scolded lightly as he tapped her on the head and led the three of them to meet the client. The man was an ordinary-looking, steady middle-aged fellow. He didn't underestimate the youngsters. Konoha's reputation as one of the 5 great shinobi villages carried weight. "I'll trouble you with the mission," the client said. "I'm ready to go whenever you are." "Let's go now," he confirmed, and Mu Yue led the group toward the Land of Rivers at once. To increase the chance of training opportunities, Mu Yue pushed for speed while they were still in the relatively safe Land of Fire, then slowed as soon as they crossed into the Land of Rivers. "The Land of Fire has good public safety, so we can travel faster. The Land of Rivers is chaotic right now. Going slower will better protect the client," he explained. Anko learned something new about mission logistics. They met no trouble on the road and reached Mount Iwaki in the northernmost part of the Land of Rivers fairly quickly. Before they set off, the client warned them again. "Those bandits are vicious. Rumor has it they not only plunder here, but even go so far as the Land of Rain to raid." "The Land of Rain, is it close?" Shisui asked, thoughtful. He had spoken a long time earlier with his uncle, Uchiha Shinhiro, who'd mentioned the Land of Rain. If he remembered right, the rain was in chaos. Iwagakure ninja had shown up there for reasons unknown. Tsunagakure sent forces concerned about Iwagakure's presence, and Kumogakure sent troops in response. All 3 great villages had some presence in rain. To still be able to plunder in such a situation suggested these bandits might include rogue ninja. Ordinary mountain thieves wouldn't be so bold. "The other side of the mountain," the client said. Mu Yue bid him farewell and set off after the bandits using the mission clues. Shisui voiced his theory as they walked. Excellent analysis. It shows you've really listened to what I taught you, Mu Yue praised. For a 7-year-old, Shisui's deductions were impressive. Where he'd fallen short, though, was in not considering his own village's response. The Land of Rain bordered 3 major nations. Konoha wouldn't be indifferent to 3 great villages all sending forces there. Mu Yue suspected Danzo had already sent route operatives into the rain. Shisui, Mu Yue-sensei, are we going to fight enemy ninja next? Anko asked, puzzled. She didn't follow the reasoning, but understood the implication. Yes, be careful, everyone, Mu Yue said. Shizune felt a nervous tightening. She had never truly fought and killed real ninja. Under Mu Yue's lead, they found the bandits' hideout. Inside were only 2 ordinary men, clearly not the force stirring trouble. So Mu Yue concluded the main group had already gone out to Rai D. He separated the 2 men for interrogation, using a classic prisoner's dilemma tactic to force them to betray the rest. Shisui, thinking it through, admitted the method was effective. It only failed if both prisoners trusted each other completely, which 2 common bandits wouldn't. The prisoners talked. The main bandit force had left a week ago. These 2 were left to guard the den. And Shisui's suspicion was confirmed. The bandit leader was actually a rogue ninja from the Land of Rain. Move faster. No tricks, one of the prisoners warned. At that moment, Shisui heard movement outside. He went to check and found several more people had appeared. As he stepped out, a shuriken flew straight at him. He barely moved. Stepping aside, he dodged the thrown tool and drew a kunai from his pouch. The newcomers didn't look like ordinary bandits, which is why he hadn't acted sooner. Now that they had attacked, they were clearly enemies. Namiki, don't attack. There are no ordinary bandits here, said the one in the middle, shaking his head at Namiki Kiyoyuki. Namiki stared at the bound man in front of him and grinned. Kid, don't underestimate anyone. A 10-year-old's knife can still kill. Yahiko's group had been pursuing bandits who had been raiding villagers in the rain. Namiki had assumed these people were hostile to Yahiko's men and attacked preemptively. Seeing Shizune and Anko rush up, Yahiko's expression shifted as he spotted Shizune's Konoha headband. So they're Konoha ninja, Yahiko said. Shisui, an intern, didn't wear a headband. With Shizune present, his identity was clear. Nagato, who was following behind Yahiko, twitched his fingers at the mention of Konoha, then quickly calmed himself. Who are you? What are you doing here? Shisui demanded, holding his kunai steady. The newcomers looked older than he and Anko, but he wasn't unsettled. They had Mu Yue with them. Yahiko put his hands up in apology. I'm Yahiko. I lead the Akatsuki organization in the Land of Rain. I apologize for the attack. My companion thought you were bandits. We'd been handling a group of bandits who were raiding villagers and came here to make sure there were no leftovers who might return. Leader of a ninja organization? Shisui was surprised. Yahiko looked only 13 or 14, barely older than them. Yahiko smiled a little. You must have been taking a mission related to these bandits too. We've helped remove some work for you, so please don't mind. Shisui waited for Mu Yue's decision. Mu Yue, who hadn't yet shown himself, had already been aware of Yahiko and the others' arrival. He'd activated his Byakugan while searching. From there, he took an instant read on the group. Name: Potential, S. Skills: Water Release Chakra, Nature Transformation, Mastery, 150,000. Water Release, Wild Water Wave, Proficient. Water Release Water Dragon Bullet, Proficient. For Yahiko's age, those stats belonged to a genius. Mu Yue thought that if Yahiko had lived, he might have been capable of Kage-level power. Name: Conqueror, 8,000. Skills: Paper Ninjutsu, Proficient, 2,000, 3,000. Paper Shuriken, Proficient. Conan's potential was slightly higher. At this stage, she and Yahiko were comparable. Mu Yue's gaze then landed on Nagato, and he felt a chill. He had a strong sense that Nagato's potential would outstrip anyone he'd ever seen. The boy carried, effectively, a Rinnegan intertwined with the Vortex clan. Nagato. Potential: SS+, 6 Paths Bloodline Rinnegan's basic talent. Skills: Fire Release Chakra Nature Transformation, Mastery, 1,000, 15,000. Wind Release Chakra Nature Transformation, Mastery 7 5,000. Yang release chakra nature transformation mastery, water release chakra nature transformation mastery. Mu Yue could only call those stats absurd. Nagato's potential exceeded SS+. He'd mastered 6 chakra natures except yin release, and while the proficiencies weren't yet extreme, mastery over so many types was terrifying. He also possessed hundreds of proficient ninjutsu, a vast arsenal. Most striking of all was the sheer volume of chakra. The temptation to take Nagato as a disciple flashed through Mu Yue's mind. The chakra returns would dwarf everything he'd get from his other students combined. But it wasn't so simple. Nagato already had Jiraiya as a teacher for 3 years. He had a master in his heart. Nagato had so many natures and jutsu that his need for a teacher in terms of raw technique was limited. And there were political and supernatural complications. Black Zetsu and Uchiha Madara were both tied to Nagato's Rinnegan. Madara had transplanted it and wouldn't abandon the boy, and Black Zetsu had schemed for that Rinnegan for ages. Becoming Nagato's teacher would require a careful plan. Mu Yue wasn't rushing. In the original story, Nagato's turning stemmed from many causes. There was time to act if needed. They really mean no harm, Mu Yue said as he stepped to Shisui's side. Yahiko, noticing Mu Yue appear so quickly, was a little surprised. Though young, he had the strength to command respect, and he didn't want trouble with this Konoha team. With Mu Yue mediating, both sides agreed it had been a misunderstanding. As Yahiko and his team left, Shisui asked Mu Yue softly, "How strong were those people just now?" Mu Yue considered the 3 in passing. "Strong. 2 of them you might not be able to beat, and 1 of them could kill you instantly." 378. Ninja killing. Mu Yue's remark drew a surprised look from Shisui. He wasn't arrogant, but he trusted his own strength. After all, he'd only been bested by Kakashi once, and that was recent. For someone to claim there was a member of that ninja organization who could kill him instantly reminded Shisui how many stronger people there were in the world, and how many of them were no older than Yahiko and the others. "There's no need to worry too much," Mu Yue said. He was gazing into the distance. "Just focus on your training. Everyone's path is different, and the final outcome isn't set until the end." Nagato's stats looked impressive, Mu Yue continued. But those Rinnegan weren't his by birth. They came from Uchiha Madara. Without having awakened the Rinnegan himself, Nagato couldn't use its unique ocular techniques, only the basic abilities like Shinra Tensei and the Almighty Pull. A Rinnegan that a user awakened themselves can manifest special eye techniques, Madara's Limbo, Border Jail, Sasuke's Ameno Tejikara. Those special techniques are on another level compared to the basic ones. That said, even the Rinnegan's basic abilities are overwhelming for opponents below Kage level. It's only against people like Madara, Hashirama, or the 6 Paths that they're comparatively limited. Shisui nodded and quickly recovered his composure. He'd never thought of himself as the greatest genius in the ninja world, so his confidence wasn't shaken. He only sighed at how vast the world was and how many geniuses he could run into simply by going out. Yahiko and the others had already handled the bandit ninjas, so Mu Yue and his team finished off the remaining 2 and reported to the client. The middle-aged client was astonished at how quickly the Konoha team had completed the job. "As expected of the Hidden Leaf," he marveled, "the efficiency is unbeatable." On the way back to Konoha, Anko exhaled. "I was nervous for nothing. They were just 2 bandits, not much of a fight." Even scatterbrained as she could be, anxiety in a life-or-death mission was natural. "Well, we basically dealt with a C-rank mission and got paid for it," Shizune said cheerfully. She was pleased. Earning that much for a short outing sounded great to her. "The payment should buy some liver supplements for Lady Tsunade. And I should save a bit for things for Mu Yue-sensei," she added, already planning. "Heh, you're right," Anko said, grinning. "It's like when a friend cleans your messy room and your parents think you did it. They give you pocket money. Free money always feels good." Their return was uneventful. They met no other ninjas. "Disband for today. Training resumes tomorrow," Mu Yue said after they reached Konoha. Even without heavy fighting, the long travel had been tiring, so he let his students rest. Anko chirped, clutching the advance Mu Yue had given her, and raced off toward the Tuanzi shop. Shizune bade her teammates goodbye and headed to Tsunade's home. A rare day off deserved rest. Shisui, without hesitation, went straight to the south border forest. He hadn't yet surpassed Kakashi to reclaim the title of Mu Yue's strongest disciple and was seizing every chance to train. Mu Yue went to the mission hall in the Hokage building to submit the mission report, then paid a visit to Tsunade. The mission had an unexpected element, but it didn't require a special report. For a C-rank mission with unforeseen developments, the client can either increase the payment or the ninjas can abandon it. Since Yahiko and his team had already handled the dangerous part, Mu Yue submitted it as a normal C rank. Seeing Mu Yue approach, Tsunade felt a mix of relief and annoyance. Relief because she'd soon be eating well, annoyance because her bet with Mu Yue had pulled her back into researching ninjutsu. She kept trying to quit the habit of gambling, but always slipped back in days later. "I should introduce you to Orochimaru. He does nothing but research ninjutsu," she said, rubbing her forehead. She almost backtracked. "No, never mind. Better not." T-Guy's brain went strange from all that research. He even dreams of immortality. When Orochimaru had been young, he'd been peculiar but calm. After the Second Shinobi World War, the three Sannin had briefly discussed their futures. Tsunade said she didn't want to do much. Jiraiya wanted to travel and find a disciple to change the world, and Orochimaru pursued eternal life through research. Mu Yue only smiled and said nothing. He had no desire to get involved with Orochimaru now, though Orochimaru hadn't yet defected and remained a candidate for Hokage. As a fellow Sannin, Tsunade could gripe, but Mu Yue kept his distance. Mu Yue reached into his pouch. Tsunade expected a scroll full of technical questions, but instead he produced a pack of cards. "I made this board game in my spare time. Research can get depressing. You can play this to relax," he said with a gentle smile. Tsunade's curiosity was piqued. She picked up a few cards and flipped them. Uchiha Tajima, skill, genjutsu, force the opponent to guess the suit of a hand card. If they guess wrong, deduct 1 stamina. Skill, fire release, convert a normal attack into a fire attack, she read aloud. "That's interesting, but you're making a game out of the Uchiha ancestors. Aren't you worried about trouble?" Senju Butsuma, skill, Senju clan, increase your stamina limit by 1. Skill, benevolence, after giving away 2 hand cards, restore 1 stamina point. Tsunade's expression grew serious. Even the Senju are in it. She was amused and oddly proud. If Senju Hashirama knew, she guessed he'd be pleased. She didn't mind at all, as long as the game treated their names with respect. Hyuga clan, skill, gentle fist, treat attack as dodge and dodge as attack. Skill, Byakugan, at the start of the turn, choose a character and view all their hand cards. Tsunade read the rules as Mu Yue explained them and grew more interested in the game, which he'd named Ninja Kill. But Mu Yue didn't start playing yet. He steered the conversation back to technical matters, the complementary ninjutsu research for the Yang Seal. "The rock breathing you can sustain for 24 hours. We can modify the sealing technique accordingly." Tsunade began her detailed explanation. Mu Yue put himself in an enlightened state and listened intently. He was glad he'd come to Tsunade. Her reputation as the strongest medical ninja was deserved. Her research into bodily techniques and seals saved him an enormous amount of time. Working alone would have taken at least twice as long, possibly far more. The next day, as Mu Yue had promised, he brought the missing cards and played a few rounds with Shizune and Tsunade. After a few games, Tsunade had a suggestion. "Can you add more character cards? 5 ninja are too few. After a lot of games, it gets repetitive. You can make cards for my grandfather and the others," she added with a grin. "I've thought of skills already. Would release, deal 4 damage to any chosen character." Mu Yue smiled politely. "I'll go through some history books in the next few days," he said, deflecting gently. He'd only made the Senju and others because he intended to play privately with Tsunade. Making a card for Senju Hashirama felt too close to home and risked being either overpowered or wrong. "You can make one for me too," Tsunade said, chuckling. Skill, super strength, +1 damage for attack and duel. Skill, medical ninjutsu, restore 1 stamina point for every stamina point lost. Mu Yue said he'd consider it. He could make a card for her, but not with skills that excessive. It would be unbalanced. That was exactly why he'd hesitated to make a Hashirama card. Too strong would break the game. Too weak would feel wrong. The name Senju Hashirama carried expectations of immense power, and Mu Yue didn't want his game to disappoint. They continued discussing rules and future cards, planning more rounds and improvements, the relaxed atmosphere a pleasant contrast to their usual duties. 379. Disciple Strength Changes and Flying Thunder God. Fire Release, Great Fireball Jutsu. Anko gathered a huge amount of chakra in her throat and used Fire Release to spit a massive fireball at Mu Yue. From another direction, Shizune launched a volley of shuriken, trying to pin him down. The fireball missed, and Mu Yue easily blocked the shuriken. Hidden in the shadows, Shisui seized the chance, activating Body Flicker and charging in. Mu Yue seemed to expect it. He stepped back and sidestepped Shisui's initial strike with calm precision. At the same time, Anko and Shizune closed in, looking for any opening. Though they outnumbered him, the difference in skill was obvious. Mu Yue dismantled Anko and Shizune with ease. Only the ever-cautious Shisui remained unscathed. Then Shisui, as if determined to make one final gamble, stopped evading with Body Flicker and rushed forward. Bang! The Shisui standing in front of Mu Yue dissolved into smoke. The real Shisui surged out from behind, chakra flaring, and lashed for Mu Yue's waist, still a little too slow. Mu Yue smiled and spun, catching Shisui's outstretched hand. With a single motion he threw Shisui, and the three of them, Shisui, Anko, and Shizune, ended up lying neatly in a row on the ground. This is brutal. 5 tries and only Shisui managed it once, Anko sighed, flat on her back, staring up at the sky. The bell grab training, held once every 3 weeks, was the event she looked forward to most. She wanted to grab that bell and, like a young protagonist in a ninja tale, have Mu Yue teach her some peerless ninjutsu. After 5 attempts, she hadn't even touched the bell, always ending up belly up on the ground. Seeing Shisui grab it during the 3rd session only made her more jealous, though Shisui hadn't seemed to show off afterward. Training is supposed to help you improve, Mu Yue said. If it were too easy, it wouldn't mean anything. If you can beat Shisui, I'll give you a bell right now. Mu Yue had designed the bell grab to force students to break through on their own. Win against Shisui, and the bell was hers. Fail but last 3 minutes against his full power, and she'd still get a bell as reward. Both would mark a real breakthrough. Win against Shisui? How is that even possible? Anko sat up, bewildered. She knew she was no match in combat, and that Shisui's talents were on another level. Maybe, she thought half-jokingly, she could win in a game of ninja kill with a lucky hand. If you can become as strong as Kakashi, you'll be able to beat me, Shisui said calmly. His strength had risen after 3 months of hard training, but he wasn't confident he could beat Kakashi. Replacing his past self might give him a chance, and Kakashi, too, surely had improved over time. I think I'll lie down a bit longer, Anko muttered and flopped back down. In her mind, Kakashi was simply an older Shisui, someone who'd graduated and whose genius had already become legend. She couldn't imagine catching up, even if she trained around the clock. Shisui, you're overestimating Kakashi. He's all talk. Once our Sharingan has 3 tomoe, we'll beat him easily. Kakashi, Obito, and the others arrived at the south border forest after finishing a mission and happened to overhear the conversation. Obito, an eternal rival of Kakashi's, couldn't help himself when he heard someone praise Kakashi. He couldn't let the Uchiha's honor be slighted. What if you don't win? Kakashi asked dryly. Don't win. Obito faltered. He'd been boasting without having the 3 tomo yet. He couldn't be sure how it would actually turn out. It's impossible to lose, Obito said loudly, trying to sound confident. Rin was nearby, and there were juniors from the Ninja Academy present, so he had to save face. Kakashi grinned. If you lose, run a lap around the Leaf Village main district, shouting, Obito is inferior to Kakashi. Cold sweat popped out on Obito's forehead. That was a cruel bet. If he actually had to do that, he might as well move out of Konoha with his grandmother that night. Anyway, you won't lose, Kakashi added, as if that made the wager safe. Stung, Obito stammered. You know that's fine. 3 tomoe Sharingan is very powerful. Inside, he was making plans. If 3 tomoe couldn't beat Kakashi, he'd stop using the Sharingan for a while and train his body hard. Deception could only carry him so far. He had to be truly strong to be at ease. What if you lose, Kakashi-senpai? Anko asked, curious. Kakashi had talked only about the punishment for Obito. She wanted to make sure it was fair all around. Yeah, if we're making a bet, everyone should be the same, Obito agreed, quickly jumping in. If Obito-senpai loses, he shouts inferior to Kakashi-senpai. If Kakashi-senpai loses, he shouts inferior to Obito-senpai. Kakashi, who'd started this, found himself boxed in by Anko's simple fairness. He shrugged. Fine. Inside, he felt uneasy. He wasn't completely sure he'd beat Obito if Obito reached 3 tomoe either. If he had to run around Konoha, calling himself inferior to Obito, he might forgo his usual mask and go out hooded instead. Shisui glanced at Anko and realized she had a real gift for fanning flames. What could have been a joke had become a serious bet, and both Kakashi and Obito, not wanting to lose face, immediately threw themselves into training. Their intensity made the whole training atmosphere in the South Border Forest even fiercer. Mu Yue mused that if Rin had been this kind of instigator, the two of them might have been rivals long ago. After a while, Mu Yue gave them individual strength tests. Obito and the others had spent the past months mostly on battlefield missions, returning only occasionally. Fortunately, the enlightenment skill that system disciples enjoyed could be adjusted through the panel, so their growth had been similar to being in Konoha proper. Since it had been 2 months since they'd come back, Mu Yue wanted to quantify their progress and adjust training accordingly. He tested them individually and compared his impressions with the appraisal skills data. The battlefield, he found, had tempered them well. Numerically, their growth rate was average, but in real combat ability, their improvement was significant. Kakashi and Obito were both functioning at true Jonin level now, worthy of promotion on merit. With Transparent World and Flame-Breathing Chakra Mode, their peak output was even higher than most Jonin. They shared a common weakness, though. Neither could sustain full-power combat for long. Kakashi's lightning flash burned huge amounts of chakra and stamina. Obito's flame-breathing mode was even more draining, especially with the Sharingan active. Obito's chakra reserve was larger, thanks to a temporary surge when he activated the Sharingan, but even so, he couldn't sustain 2 Fire Dragon Flame bullets in flame-breathing mode. Both had abilities well suited to them, but their youth and physical conditioning limited endurance. At 18, Mu Yue thought things would be different. Rin surprised him the most. Her overall improvement had been the greatest. Her medical ninjutsu made significant strides, and battlefield tempering enhanced her water release and taijutsu, making her an excellent chuunin, not because of raw power, but for utility. As she stood, Mu Yue resolved to teach her some auxiliary water release techniques. Right now, Rin wasn't suitable for frontline output. She needed years more development. Mu Yue guessed that in a few years, if Tsunade developed metodic regeneration and Rin learned Yin Seal technique, she'd be able to handle both support and output. Obito's return meant Minato had returned too, which pleased Mu Yue. He had stalled at 99 proficiency in Flying Thunder God technique and needed Minato's help to get it over the line. Once Minato showed him the method, it wouldn't be difficult. Mu Yue had skill proficiency scrolls and a ninjutsu mastery scroll that could push Flying Thunder God to mastery level. That evening, Minato came to Mu Yue's house as usual. "Minato, I'm stuck on Flying Thunder God. Do you have time tonight?" Mu Yue asked while cooking. "I'll tell you after dinner," Minato agreed. He didn't have many days to spare these days, but he'd help where he could. After Mu Yue finished cooking, Minato used Flying Thunder God to deliver some food to Kushina and then returned to eat with Mu Yue. He'd already seen Kushina once since coming back, so he wasn't in a hurry. "Mu Yue, you'll have to look after Obito and the others for a while longer," Minato said with a slightly apologetic look. He felt like he hadn't been a good enough teacher and was leaving them in Mu Yue's care too often. "The village sent me to cooperate with Orochimaru-sama to quickly resolve the Kumogakure situation in the Land of Hot Water," Minato explained. The Hidden Mist's declaration of war wasn't idle talk. The Mist had already started operations along the Fire Country's east coast. Konoha wanted to settle one battlefield quickly to free forces to handle the Hidden Mist. They chose Kumogakure over Iwagakure because with the Eight Tails Jinchuriki already in trouble, Kumogakure appeared the more manageable opponent. Konoha simply couldn't afford to fight on 3 fronts. Minato's schedule was brutal. He was being shifted like a brick to wherever the village needed him, with little rest. Mu Yue listened carefully. Frontline intelligence was hard to come by for someone in the rear, and details about the hidden mist were especially limited. After dinner, Mu Yue used enlightenment on himself, and then ran through the parts he hadn't understood. No matter what the front lines did, self-improvement remained the most important thing. "That's simple. You just need to do this," Minato said after thinking it through. He explained the fix to Mu Yue's Flying Thunder God problem. At first, Mu Yue lagged in following Minato's train of thought. Minato gave the solution without spelling out every step, but with patience, Mu Yue caught on. Skill, Flying Thunder God Technique, Beginner, 1-500. 380. Panel. Add points. After Minato left, Mu Yue stared at the Flying Thunder God Technique on his panel. It still showed as Beginner. He didn't hesitate and opened the Skill Proficiency scroll in his inventory. Mu Yue rarely burned through those scrolls on high-level ninjutsu. Aside from one test right after he got them and a few used later on medical ninjutsu, most had been squirreled away. His one Skill Mastery scroll had gone unused until now. He selected the Flying Thunder God Technique, clicked Confirm, and watched the system respond. Skill Mastery scroll consumed. Skill Proficiency increased. Flying Thunder God Technique, Mastery Level 1. The instant the point registered, a rush of training memories flooded him. Problems that once seemed deep and confusing snapped into crystal clarity, the hard lessons resolved into obvious steps. Reaching mastery reshaped his understanding. He realized a few things at once. First, Go Home Mu Yue might actually be possible. The Flying Thunder God Technique's range was governed mainly by two limits: perception range and chakra reserves. If Mu Yue could expand his perception to cover the entire ninja world and amass enough chakra to use Hiraishin from any point back home, he could literally rest at home and appear anywhere to ambush an opponent. With that much chakra, it'd be unlikely anyone could force him to leave home in the first place. Beyond perception and chakra, proficiency itself altered both distance and chakra cost. Proficiency was like the technique's realm. At beginner, a teleport from A to B might cost 5,000 chakra, and A to C could be impossible. At skilled, the same trip might cost 3,000 chakra, and direct A to C jumps would become available. Mastery lowered costs further and expanded the reachable distance. With that in mind, Mu Yue reconsidered old questions, like why Tobirama died covering a retreat instead of teleporting away with Danzo and Hiruzen. Tobirama was a genius of forbidden jutsu, but that didn't mean every aspect of his techniques were perfected. In his era, Hiraishin probably drank enormous chakra, especially when carrying others. It functioned as a combat trump card rather than a moment-to-moment escape tool. Edo Tensei, by contrast, could be used to ferry corpses because of its effectively infinite chakra. If the Flying Thunder God had been improved, the most likely candidate was Minato. Mu Yue didn't stop at one scroll. He consumed another skill proficiency scroll and watched the numbers climb again. Skill proficiency scroll consumed, skill proficiency increased. Flying Thunder God Technique, mastery level 68-15. The gain was smaller, new training impressions, but not as dramatic as the beginner to mastery leap. He pressed on, throwing in 7 more scrolls. He had acquired 13 skill proficiency scrolls in total, most gifts after his students' academy exams, a few from promotions or training missions. He'd used 3 of them previously, so 10 were in his stock before this session. Skill proficiency scroll consumed, skill proficiency increased. Flying Thunder God Technique, mastery level 1336. The proficiency leaped by over 1,000 in one go, and a flood of fresh insights followed. The gap to the next threshold looked large on paper, but 1,000+ points was already almost half a mastery level. Significant progress. Mu Yue stopped there, keeping the last 2 scrolls tucked away for emergencies. Content with a mastery Flying Thunder God Technique at over 1,300 proficiency, he tested it. He took out a kunai, channeled chakra into it, and let a black character bloom across the metal. Teacher. He threw the kunai and activated Hiraishin, vanishing from the cramped house to reappear on the training ground. For short hops, he had no reaction problems, thanks to Transparent World or Lightning Release enhanced reflexes, and for such distances, his performance was comparable to Minato's, at least to the Minato from the fight with the Jinchuriki. Mu Yue hadn't seen Minato in the most recent battles, so a direct comparison was difficult, but his panel told the story of Minato's rapid development. When Mu Yue first met him, Minato had about 40,000 chakra, then roughly half a year later it rose to 47,600, and now his chakra had reached 69,000. Mu Yue checked his own panel. Name, chakra, 4-4. When they first met, Mu Yue had just over 4,000 chakra, while Minato had 40,000. In under 2 years, Mu Yue had broken 6 digits. Chakra had once been his weak point. Now his total ranked among the higher levels in Konoha. It still wasn't quite enough for some of his plans, but it was a vast improvement. After wrapping up his test, Mu Yue went home and laid out his immediate tasks, pushing Obito's life mission toward the 20-point reward, perfecting the Yang Seal and creating complementary jutsu, researching sun breathing, and figuring out how to take Nagato as a disciple and raise his chakra to chakra-ton levels. With his recent gains and the panel's help, he had the momentum to press forward.